Think you know what it was like to watch gladiators fight in ancient Rome. Most people imagine cheering crowds and brutal death matches, but the reality was far more complex and surprising. The Roman Colosseum wasn't just an arena, it was a sophisticated entertainer machine with hidden technology, carefully managed spectacles, and social rules that would shock you. What really happened when 50,000 Romans packed into those stone seats wasn't quite what Hollywood shows us. The experience was simultaneously more civilized and more brutal than you might expect, with engineering marvels hidden beneath the blood-soaked sand. In this video, we'll explore what it was truly like to be a spectator at the Roman Games, from the uncomfortable stone seats to the complex social hierarchy, from the incredible underground machinery to the surprising rules of gladiatorial combat. If you like these videos, I would appreciate if you clicked like or subscribed, as it's important for the channel and it helps others find it too, just like you did. Thank you. Now, let's get started. Picture waking up in ancient Rome around 80 CE when the massive Flavian amphitheater had just been completed. The emperor has announced games today, and you've managed to get a ticket. The stone floor feels cold against your feet as you splash water on your face, grab some bread dipped in watered-down wine. Maybe an olive if you're lucky. Outside, the entire city buzzes with excitement. People pour through the streets, all heading toward that towering structure, 15 stories high, made of gleaming travertine limestone. The Colosseum dominates everything around it. Impossible to miss, impossible to ignore. What's fascinating is how this whole spectacle worked. Admission was completely free, which sounds wonderful until you realize where you sit depends entirely on your place in Roman society. If you're wealthy, you get the front rows. If you're a slave or a woman, you climb all the way to the top. Everyone else gets squeezed somewhere in the middle. The building itself was an engineering marvel. 80 entrances, 76 for regular folks like you and me. Each person got a small pottery shard with a number scratched into it. Your ticket to find the right entrance. No computers, no scanning, just thousands of people trying to match numbers while pushing through crowds. Once you find your entrance, you walk through dark, cool corridors that echo with footsteps. The smell hits you first, sweat and stone, and something wilder, the scent of animals waiting somewhere below. Then you emerge into sunlight and see the arena stretching out before you, covered in sand to soak up the blood that will flow. That word arena actually comes from the Latin word for sand. Arena. Romans were practical people. They knew what was coming and prepared accordingly. The sight would take your breath away. 50,000 seats rising in perfect circles, every level of society arranged according to their status. Finding your seat meant climbing stone steps, worn smooth by countless feet over the years. If you were middle class, you got about 15 inches of space on a stone bench, your knees almost touching the person in front of you. No cushions, no cup holders, just hard stone, and very little room to move. Above everything, sailors worked to unfurl the massive awning called the velarium. This remarkable piece of engineering could extend across the entire arena, protecting spectators from sun and rain. Imagine the coordination required, dozens of men working ropes and pulleys to cover such an enormous space. The whole experience would overwhelm your senses. Vendors circling the outside, selling chickpeas and sausages. Gladiator figurines for the children. The noise of 50,000 conversations happening at once, creating a buzz you could feel in your chest. Children darting between legs, while soldiers kept watch for troublemakers. What strikes you is how this building brought together every level of Roman society. Nobles in their finest togas sat near the front. Common citizens in simple tunics filled the middle sections. Women and slaves climbed to the highest seats. Everyone had their place. Everyone knew where they belonged. The morning sun would peek through your apartment window in one of those rickety multi-story buildings, Romans called insula. The smell of fresh bread from nearby bakeries mixed with less pleasant odors of a city without modern plumbing. Your stomach would grumble as you prepared for the day, muscles aching from yesterday's work. Walking through the city toward the games, you join rivers of people all flowing in the same direction. The excitement builds with every step. Stories you've heard about exotic animals and skilled fighters, and elaborate spectacles about to become reality. Your worn leather sandals scrape against paved streets as the crowd grows thicker. Approaching the massive structure, you notice detailed carvings decorating every entrance. Scenes of battles, gods and goddesses, reminders of Rome's greatness carved into stone that will outlast the empire itself. Numbers engraved above each archway help guide the crowds, though finding your specific entrance still means pushing through thousands of eager spectators. The contrast hits you immediately, stepping from bright morning heat into cool, dark passages. Your footsteps echo in vaulted corridors while more people press in behind you, their excitement almost touchable. Then suddenly, you emerge back into sunlight and see the full scope of what Romans had built. This wasn't just entertainment, it was a statement. 50,000 people gathered in one place, fed and housed and organized according to rigid social rules. Free admission meant everyone could attend. But where you sat reminded you exactly where you stood in the world. The emperor's gift came with a message about power and order, and your place in both. The arena floor stretched out below, like a stage set for drama and death. Sand covered everything, practical and symbolic, ready to absorb whatever the day would bring. Around it, thousands upon thousands of seats climbed toward the sky, each level representing different layers of Roman society, all brought together to witness spectacles that would be remembered for centuries. Picture a morning 2,000 years ago, where the sun beats down mercilessly on stone seats, and the air fills with anticipation. There's something almost magical about how those massive sheets of canvas would unfurl across the arena, pulled by sailors who understood the language of ropes and wind. These weren't just any sailors either. They were men who had crossed dangerous waters, now using their skills to create shade for thousands of strangers. Of course, not everyone got the same treatment. The wealthy citizens lounging in their cushioned seats near the front enjoyed generous patches of cool shadow. Meanwhile, those sitting higher up, the everyday Romans, the shopkeepers and craftsmen, they made do with whatever coverage they could get. There's something timeless about this, isn't it? How even in entertainment, social order found a way to express itself through something as simple as shade. The heat would build steadily, and with it came the symphony of a gathering crowd. Voices rising and falling, placing bets, debating the merits of different fighters. Vendors moved like streams through the masses, carrying watered wine that was warm and frankly not very good, but it served its purpose. Sometimes the simplest things, a cup of wine, a piece of bread, become precious when you're caught up in something larger than yourself. There were always those seasoned spectators, weathered faces telling stories of countless days spent in these seats. They'd share their wisdom with newcomers, pointing out which gladiators to watch for, which animals were being brought from the farthest corners of the empire. Lions from Africa, they'd say with gleaming eyes, bigger than anything you've seen. These weren't just entertainment, these exotic creatures. They were symbols of Rome's incredible reach, proof that the empire could pluck the wildest beasts from distant lands. Then there were the gladiators themselves, figures of legend walking among mere mortals, men like Flamma, the Syrian fighter, who had won freedom multiple times, but chose to stay in the arena. Think about that choice for a moment, choosing danger over safety, choosing the roar of the crowd over the quiet of retirement. There's something deeply human about that decision, isn't it? The pull of purpose, even when that purpose might destroy you. When the emperor arrived, everything changed. The trumpet's call would cut through every conversation, every argument, every laugh. Suddenly, thousands of people would fall silent, all eyes turning toward those cushioned seats, draped in imperial purple. Emperor Titus himself, the most powerful man in the known world, would raise his hand, and the crowd would explode in response. The sound would bounce off stone walls, creating this wall of noise that you could feel in your chest. The Romans loved their spectacle, their special effects. Platforms would rise from beneath the arena floor, as if by magic, powered by clever systems of pulleys and counterweights. People and animals would appear and disappear, creating moments of wonder that made the impossible seem routine. It's fascinating how humans have always craved this, haven't they? The desire to see the laws of nature bent, to witness something that shouldn't be possible. But the crowd knew what it came for, and it wasn't acrobats or jugglers. Those performances were just the warm-up, the appetizer, before the main course. You could feel the restlessness building, thousands of people shifting in their seats, waiting for something darker, something more primal. There's an uncomfortable truth there about human nature, our attraction to violence, our need to see struggle and survival played out before our eyes. The animal hunts would begin with something almost gentle, deer and ostriches racing across the sand. But then came the wilder creatures, boars with tusks like daggers, bulls with eyes full of rage. The hunters, trained professionals called bestiari, would enter with their spears and bows, and what followed was both horrifying and mesmerizing. These weren't fights so much as they were demonstrations showing Rome's dominance over the natural world itself. The arena floor would tell its own story throughout the day. Golden sand slowly staining red, then being raked over by slaves who appeared between events like stagehands in some vast bloody theatre. There's something haunting about that image, the way violence gets covered up, smoothed over, prepared for the next act. As the morning wore on, the heat became its own character in the drama. Sweat would trickle down backs, fans would flutter in wealthy hands, and simple gestures like sharing bread became acts of kindness in the overwhelming atmosphere. The human body has its own rhythm, its own needs, even when the mind is caught up in spectacle. Then came the executions, the condemned criminals thrown to beasts in what Romans called justice. The crowd would grow excited, knowing this meant the truly dangerous animals were coming, the lions and tigers that could tear a person apart in moments. There's something deeply troubling about turning death into entertainment, yet thousands would lean forward, eager to see what came next. Between the bloodshed, there were these elaborate productions, entire landscapes built in the arena to recreate famous battles. Trees and rocks would be arranged to represent distant forests, and actors dressed as Roman soldiers would face off against men playing barbarian tribes. These weren't real fights, they were carefully choreographed performances, but they served a purpose, reminding everyone watching exactly who ruled the world and why. The crowd would cheer for Rome and boo the barbarians, caught up in patriotic fervor, celebrating victories they had never seen in wars they had never fought. It's interesting how we can become invested in stories, how we can feel pride in achievements that aren't our own, simply because they belong to the group we're part of. But sitting there in the heat, watching these performances, you might wonder about the real battles these scenes represented. Were they truly as clean and heroic as the reenactment suggested? Or were they messy and terrifying like actual combat tends to be? The Romans, like all peoples, loved their myths of glory and honor, but the truth is usually more complicated, more human, more fragile than the stories we tell ourselves. The quality of light began shifting overhead as the sun climbed higher in the Roman sky. Shadows grew shorter across the massive arena floor, telling everyone that midday was approaching. This wasn't just any ordinary moment in the day's entertainment. Something darker was about to begin. The trumpet blast that echoed through the stone corridors changed everything. You could feel it in the air, the way conversations died down, the way thousands of people suddenly focused their attention on the arena floor below. The mood transformed from light-hearted to something much more serious, much more deadly. Workers hurried to clear away the morning's props and scenery. What came next was a procession that made stomachs tighten with dread. Men walked in chains, surrounded by Roman soldiers. These weren't performers or athletes. These were the condemned, people who had been sentenced to die in front of this massive crowd. Some of these prisoners were criminals, murderers who had taken lives, arsonists who had burned down buildings, thieves who had stolen from Roman citizens. Others were prisoners of war, captured enemies who had fought against the might of Rome. And yes, there might have been Christians among them, though it's interesting how history gets twisted over time. The idea that Christians were constantly thrown to lions in the Colosseum is actually more myth than reality. It happened sometimes, but not nearly as often as most people believe. Terror showed clearly on every face as these men realized what awaited them. This wasn't going to be quick or merciful. The Roman Empire had very specific ideas about punishment and deterrence. These executions weren't just about ending lives. They were about sending messages to anyone who might consider stepping outside the boundaries of Roman law and order. The crowd that had been cheerful and friendly during the morning's entertainment suddenly turned ugly. Insults and curses rained down on the prisoners from thousands of throats. These condemned men represented everything that threatened the Roman way of life, the famous peace that Rome brought to its territories through strength and fear. Watching human beings who knew they were about to die horribly for entertainment created a sickening feeling that was hard to shake. But looking away seemed impossible. Everyone kept watching, even when their conscience told them not to. The first group of prisoners got tied to wooden posts that had been set up around the arena floor. Then came one of the Colosseum's most impressive engineering features. Trapdoors hidden beneath the sandy surface suddenly opened up. From underground chambers that most spectators never saw, wild animals emerged into the blazing sunlight. Lions appeared, lean and dangerous. These weren't well-fed zoo animals. They had been deliberately starved to make them more aggressive, more likely to attack immediately. The Romans understood exactly how to manipulate every aspect of these spectacles for maximum dramatic effect. What followed was brutal and mercifully quick. The crowd exploded into cheers and applause, but many individual spectators found themselves closing their eyes, unable to watch fellow human beings being torn apart. The sounds alone were enough to haunt someone's dreams. Screams mixing with animal snarls, the terrible wet noises that violence makes when it's real, instead of pretend. Slaves immediately rushed out with rakes to smooth fresh sand over the evidence of what had just happened. The Romans had turned even cleanup into an efficient, practiced routine. Within minutes, the arena floor looked pristine again, ready for the next group of condemned prisoners. A neighbor might offer reassurance that the gladiator fights coming later would be different. More like proper combat between trained warriors with skill and honor involved, not just raw butchery. This distinction mattered to Roman audiences, who saw themselves as civilized people who could appreciate athletic excellence and courage. But first, the executions continued through the hottest part of the day. Each death became more elaborate than the last, as if the organizers were competing with themselves to create increasingly creative forms of killing. Some prisoners were forced to act out scenes from mythology before being killed for real, playing gods or heroes whose stories everyone in the audience knew by heart. Others received weapons they had no idea how to use, and were made to fight each other, until only one remained alive. The cruelty was calculated and deliberate. Every detail had been planned to maximize the psychological impact on both the dying and the watching. The crowd loved every minute of it. They cheered and gasped and called out suggestions, as if they were watching a theatrical performance instead of actual human beings losing their lives in agony. By the time the last condemned prisoner had been killed, the sun had moved past its highest point in the sky. The afternoon was beginning, which meant a longer break before the main event that everyone had really come to see. People stood up to stretch muscles that had been sitting on hard stone benches for hours. They visited the public latrines that were built into the outer ring of the massive building, bought more food and wine from vendors, and engaged in loud discussions about what they had witnessed and what was still to come. The Roman public bathroom system was quite advanced for its time, though it would seem strange to modern sensibilities. Long stone benches with holes cut into them were positioned over constantly flowing water channels. There was no privacy whatsoever, but at least the flowing water kept things relatively sanitary compared to the waste disposal methods most people dealt with at home. Returning to those hard stone seats after hours of sitting meant dealing with aching backs and stiff legs, but physical discomfort became completely forgotten when the trumpets announced that the gladiatorial games were finally about to begin. This was the real reason most people had come to the Colosseum on this particular day. A new procession entered the arena, but this one was completely different from the miserable parade of condemned prisoners. Gladiators marched in perfect formation, their armor polished until it gleamed in the afternoon sunlight. Each type of fighter was visually distinct, trained in specific fighting styles that had evolved over decades of arena combat. The Executator wore heavy armor with a smooth helmet and carried a short sword. The Retiarius fought with a net and trident, relying on speed and agility instead of heavy protection. The Phregs used a curved blade that required different techniques than straight swords. The Murmillo wore a helmet decorated with a fish crest that identified his fighting style to the crowd. These men were magnificent physical specimens, their bodies sculpted through years of intense training. They approached the imperial box, where the emperor sat, and raised their weapons in the traditional salute. Their voices rang out across the arena in Latin words that sent chills through the crowd. Ave Imperator, moritri te salutant. Hail Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. The crowd went absolutely wild, and it was impossible not to get caught up in the excitement of the moment. Despite all the horror that had come before, there was something genuinely thrilling about seeing these trained warriors preparing for combat. These weren't condemned criminals being led to slaughter. These were professional fighters, athletes who had chosen this dangerous life. Many were slaves, certainly, but some were free men who had voluntarily signed contracts to become gladiators. The potential for fame and fortune that success in the arena could bring was enough to attract men who had other options in life. The gladiators took their positions, carefully paired, according to fighting styles that would create the most interesting and balanced matches. Decades of experience had taught the organizers exactly which combinations would provide the best entertainment for the crowd. The first pair stepped forward, while the others withdrew to the edges of the arena. A referee took his position nearby, holding a long staff that marked his authority. He would enforce the rules that governed gladiatorial combat. Yes, there were actually rules. Even in this deadly environment, gladiatorial fighting wasn't the chaotic free-for-all that modern movies often show. It was more like an extremely dangerous sport, with established techniques, strategies, and codes of conduct that both fighters understood. The referee gave his signal, and the first match began. The crowd fell relatively quiet, everyone focused on watching the skill and courage being displayed before them. These early matches usually weren't fought to the death. They were designed to showcase technique and bravery, rather than simply produce corpses. The gladiators circled each other carefully, looking for openings in their opponent's defense, testing reactions and timing. When they actually engaged in combat, it happened in quick, violent bursts of action. Metal scraped against metal, feet shuffled and pivoted in the sand, and every movement had purpose and training behind it. An experienced spectator might point out subtle details that untrained eyes would miss, how one gladiator used a fake attack to draw out his opponent's response, how another fighter used his shield not just for protection, but as an offensive weapon to create openings for his sword. Gradually, what had first looked like simple brutality revealed itself to be genuine artistry. These men weren't just trying to hurt each other, they were demonstrating skills that had taken years to develop. The match ended when one gladiator managed to disarm his opponent and force him to the ground. The defeated fighter raised his index finger in the traditional gesture, pleading for mercy from the crowd. The victorious gladiator looked up to the spectators, who roared their approval. This had been an exciting, skillful fight, and they wanted both men to survive so they could provide entertainment again in future games. The emperor, following the clearly expressed will of the people, gave the signal for mercy. The defeated gladiator would live to fight another day. Success in the arena wasn't just about winning, it was about winning, in a way that impressed the audience. More matches followed as the afternoon continued, each one more elaborate and high stakes than the last. The most famous gladiators were saved for the later bouts, when the crowd was fully warmed up and ready for the biggest thrills of the day. These final fights sometimes did end in death, though not nearly as often as most people imagine. Dead gladiators represented enormous financial losses to their owners, who had invested years and fortunes in training them. A good gladiator was far too valuable to waste casually. The morning sun catches the massive stone walls, and you can't help but stop for a moment, just to take it all in. This building, this incredible structure that dominates the Roman skyline, represents something much deeper than entertainment. It's a mirror, really, reflecting back everything Rome believes about itself, everything it wants the world to see. Walking closer, you notice the intricate details carved into the facade. Each arch, each column, speaks to the skill of craftsmen who spent years bringing this vision to life. But behind all that beauty, there's something else entirely waiting inside. The Romans have a peculiar talent for wrapping brutality in elegance, for making violence seem almost artistic. Think about what happens here, day after day. Men train for years, their bodies becoming living weapons. Also, they can face death in front of thousands of strangers. These gladiators, they're not just mindless killers throwing themselves into hopeless battles. No, they're athletes, professionals, incredibly valuable investments that took enormous resources to create. A good gladiator represents months, sometimes years, of careful training. The best trainers in the empire work with them, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to survive. There's sword work, of course, but also strategy, showmanship, how to read a crowd, how to make the audience love you enough to spare your life when things go badly. The economics of it all would surprise most people. Killing off gladiators left and right would bankrupt the games quickly. These men are expensive, like prize racehorses today. Their owners, their trainers, everyone involved has a financial interest in keeping them breathing, keeping them fighting another day. Inside the arena, you'll see different fighting styles, each with its own tactical challenges. Take the Rhetorius, for instance. He carries a net and a trident, wearing minimal armor, relying entirely on speed and cunning. His whole strategy revolves around staying just out of reach, looking for that perfect moment to cast his net and trap his opponent. Then there's his natural enemy, the Secutor, heavily armored, carrying sword and shield, built like a moving fortress. The matchup creates this beautiful tension, this dance between opposing philosophies of combat, light versus heavy, speed versus strength, agility versus protection. When these two styles meet, you get something that transcends mere violence. The crowd understands they're watching tactical genius at work. Every step, every feint, every movement has been calculated, practiced thousands of times in training yards across the city. The audience becomes part of the performance too. They're not passive observers, they're participants, their voices helping to determine who lives, who dies, who gets to walk out of that arena. There's something intoxicating about having that power, about being part of something so much larger than yourself. The emperor sits there, reading the crowd's mood, translating their roars into life or death decisions, but even he's not really in control. The people, the mob, they hold the real power in those moments. They decide what courage looks like, what mercy means, whether a fighter's skill deserves reward or punishment. Sometimes, when both gladiators have fought with exceptional skill, with genuine courage, the crowd demands mercy for both. These moments reveal something beautiful about human nature, this recognition that true artistry, even in violence, deserves preservation. The whole spectacle exists in this strange space between civilization and savagery. The same people who create magnificent architecture, who write poetry, who develop complex legal systems, they gather here to watch men bleed for entertainment. It's contradiction on the grandest possible scale. After hours of sitting on those stone seats, your body starts to remind you that comfort wasn't exactly the primary concern when they designed this place. Smart spectators bring cushions, little wool-stuffed things that make the difference between enjoying the games and spending the entire day shifting around, trying to find a position that doesn't make your back ache. The smart ones also arrive early, before the crowds pack the entrances. Before every good spot gets claimed, they walk around the entire structure, appreciating its engineering, understanding how this marvel of construction actually works. Those early morning hours, when the streets are still quiet, when shopkeepers are just opening their stalls, that's when you can really see the Colosseum for what it is. Not just an arena, but a statement about Roman power, Roman ingenuity, Roman values. The vendors know the rhythm of the games. They position themselves strategically, selling food to spectators who spent all day watching spectacle, who suddenly realize they haven't eaten since dawn. These thermopolia, these fast food stands, they're as much a part of the experience as anything happening in the arena. Walking home after a full day of games, your mind processes everything you've witnessed. The violence, yes, but also the skill, the drama, the way an entire city comes together around these events. There's something addictive about being part of that crowd, about feeling the collective energy of 50,000 people, all focused on the same moment. The dying light turns the city golden as you make your way through streets filled with other spectators, all of them discussing what they've seen, placing bets on tomorrow's matches, already anticipating the next opportunity to witness something extraordinary. Tomorrow brings new games, new fighters, new stories of courage and skill, played out on sand that's seen more drama than most people experience in entire lifetimes. The cycle continues, day after day, this ritual that defines what it means to be Roman. Your muscles will ache tomorrow, reminding you of hours spent on stone seats, but you know you'll return. Everyone returns. The Colosseum calls to something deep in the human spirit, this desire to witness greatness, even when that greatness comes wrapped in brutality. Long before the sun would warm the ancient stones, workers were already stirring beneath Rome's greatest monument. Picture this massive oval structure, rising from the earth like some impossible dream, made real. 3 stories of arches, stacked one upon another, each level decorated with columns that told their own story. The bottom floor showed off the sturdy Doric style, simple and strong. Above that, the more elegant Ionic columns reached upward, and at the very top, the fancy Corinthian capitals bloomed like stone flowers, all curves and elaborate details. It's almost hard to believe, but this entire masterpiece took only 8 to 10 years to build. Think about that for a moment. 8 years to create something that would stand for nearly 2,000. The hands that shaped those stones, that lifted those massive blocks into place, belonged mostly to Jewish captives brought to Rome after their city fell. There's something deeply moving about that, isn't there? These people, torn from their homeland, their temples destroyed, somehow created something that outlasted the very empire that enslaved them. The Romans had this way of being absolutely brilliant and absolutely brutal at the same time. Every innovation served a purpose, every detail had meaning. Those arches weren't just pretty decorations, they were carefully numbered, each one marking a specific entrance. Imagine trying to get 50,000 people into a building without some kind of system. Chaos, pure chaos. But the Romans, they thought of everything. Each person who bought a ticket found their number carved right there above the archway. No confusion, no fighting over where to go. Just follow your number, find your entrance, take your seat. It's the same system we use today at modern stadiums, and we act like it's some great innovation. The Romans figured it out 2 millennia ago. As morning light crept across the city, carts began rolling toward the great amphitheater. Heavy loads of fresh sand, clean and golden, ready to cover yesterday's stains. Because there would be stains, there always were. The sand served a practical purpose, soaking up what needed soaking up, but it also created this strange beauty, this clean slate, this fresh beginning for each day's entertainment. Slaves moved like shadows, carrying elaborate props and painted backdrops. Imagine being responsible for set design in ancient Rome. Your stage wasn't just any stage, it was the most famous stage in the world. Every piece had to be perfect, every detail considered. These weren't simple games. They were productions, carefully choreographed spectacles designed to amaze and terrify in equal measure. And then there were the animals. Handlers led caged beasts through service entrances, down into the darkness beneath the arena floor. Lions from Africa, bears from the northern forests, exotic creatures that most Romans had never seen, would never see anywhere else. These animals traveled thousands of miles to meet their fate in that circle of sand. There's something almost cosmic about it, the way the entire known world seemed to flow into this one building. Beneath your feet, if you had been standing there that morning, lay an entire hidden city. They called it the Hypogeum, this underground maze of corridors and chambers. 2 full levels of rooms and cages, workshops and waiting areas. It was like the world's most elaborate basement, except this basement was designed to create miracles. The engineering down there would impress us even today. Wooden platforms that could rise through trapdoors in the arena floor, powered by systems of ropes and counterweights. Imagine sitting in the stands, watching what seemed like an empty arena, when suddenly a full-grown lion appeared as if from nowhere, or entire forest scene rose from beneath the sand, complete with trees and rocks and flowing water. The workers who operated these machines were artists in their own way. They had to time everything perfectly, coordinate their efforts with the events happening above. One mistake, one moment of poor timing, and the illusion would be ruined. Or worse, someone might get hurt. These contraptions were powerful enough to lift huge weights, certainly powerful enough to crush a careless worker. In the dim torchlight of those underground chambers, gladiators prepared for what might be their final performance. But here's what might surprise you. They weren't all desperate slaves, waiting to die. Many were professionals, athletes who had chosen this life. Some were even free men who fought for money and glory. They laughed together, shared jokes, checked each other's equipment with the casual familiarity of teammates. Their weapons were works of art in themselves, swords balanced to perfection, shields decorated with intricate designs, helmets that provided protection while still allowing the crowd to see their faces, because that was important, that human connection. The audience needed to see their expressions, their fear or confidence or determination. The men who owned and trained these fighters, the Lanistae, were like sports agents and coaches rolled into one. They had invested fortunes in their gladiators, money for training, equipment, food, medical care. A good gladiator could make his owner wealthy. A dead gladiator was a total loss. So these managers walked among their fighters, checking every detail, offering last-minute advice, calculating odds and potential profits. The smell down there was something you'd never forget. Animal musk mixed with human sweat, leather oil, the metallic tang of weapons being sharpened. And yes, blood, always the faint smell of blood, soaked into the wooden floors, the stone walls, impossible to completely wash away. It was the perfume of empire, the scent of entertainment, built on death. Security was tight, naturally. Spectators weren't supposed to wander into these preparation areas. Too dangerous, too many things that could go wrong. A lion might escape its cage, a piece of machinery might malfunction, a gladiator might panic and lash out at anyone nearby. The workers knew their jobs, moved with practiced efficiency through spaces barely lit by flickering torches. By the time the sun was properly up, the transformation was complete. What had been a bustling construction site became a temple of entertainment. The fresh sand lay smooth and perfect, unmarked by what was to come. The hidden machinery waited silently beneath trapdoors. The animals paced in their cages, sensing something was about to happen. Above ground, vendors set up their stalls, calling out their wares to the gathering crowds. Cushions for rent, because those stone seats could get mighty uncomfortable during a long day of games. Food and drink, programs describing the day's events, small clay figurines of famous gladiators that children could take home and play with. The acoustics in that building was something special. Whispers could carry across the arena, cheers could shake the very foundations. The architects had understood sound as well as they understood stone and mortar. Every curve, every angle had been calculated to enhance the experience, to make sure that every person in those 50,000 seats could hear the clash of weapons, the roar of beasts, the final words of dying men. As spectators found their seats, as cushions were arranged and refreshments prepared. The great machine prepared to spring into life. In the imperial box, servants made final preparations for their most important guest. The emperor's comfort was paramount. His view had to be perfect, his safety absolute. From his elevated position, he would literally hold the power of life and death, his thumb deciding the fate of wounded gladiators. The crowd's energy was infectious, building like a wave that would soon crash over the arena floor. Children clutched their toy gladiators, acting out battles they'd seen or imagined. Adults placed bets, argued about fighters' merits, shared gossip about scandals and rivalries. For many, this was their one escape from the grinding routine of daily life in ancient Rome. And in those final moments before the games began, there was a strange kind of peace. The calm before the storm, you might say. All the preparation was done. All the pieces were in place. Soon the trapdoors would open, the fighters would emerge, and the greatest show on earth would begin again. Blood and sand, triumph and tragedy, all wrapped up in spectacle that still haunts our imagination today. Picture sitting on warm stone benches, the morning sun slowly climbing higher in the Roman sky. The air carries the scent of thousands of people gathered together, mixed with hints of exotic animals and roasted nuts. Around you, families share this moment like any other cultural tradition. Fathers explain the day's events to wide-eyed sons, passing down knowledge that connects generations. A vendor weaves through the crowd, carrying clay cups filled with watered wine. The liquid tastes slightly sharp on your tongue, but it helps with the growing heat. These small copper coins you hand over represent hours of work for many Romans, yet here they flow freely for simple pleasures. Another seller follows close behind, his wooden tray loaded with almonds, dried figs, and small cakes dripping with honey. The crunch of nuts between your teeth mingles with the sounds of anticipation all around. Everyone seems to have their favorite snacks, their little rituals that make the day special. The woman beside you wears the simple but dignified robes of a Roman matron. Her husband has brought her here before, many times, and she speaks of these events like old friends. She knows which seats catch the best breezes, where the massive awning will cast its welcome shade. These details matter when you're planning to spend an entire day watching spectacles unfold. She mentions the incredible naval battles that sometimes fill this very space with water. Imagine the engineering required, the careful waterproofing, the countless gallons needed to float actual warships. Hundreds of men would fight and die in recreated battles from history, bringing ancient conflicts to life for modern audiences. The casualness with which she mentions drowning reveals how differently Romans viewed life and death. Trumpets pierce the air, their bright notes commanding instant attention. Every person rises as one, 20,000 voices joining in thunderous approval. The emperor enters his special box, draped in purple that costs more than most people earn in lifetimes. Gold thread catches the light with every movement, transforming him into something more than mortal. This single gesture, his raised hand acknowledging the crowd, demonstrates the strained relationship between ruler and ruled. He needs their approval as much as they need his entertainment. It's a dance of power that keeps the massive city functioning, keeps people content despite their often difficult lives. The opening parade flows through the grand entrance like a river of exotic wonders. Animal handlers struggle with chains that hold creatures from distant continents. Hunters display weapons crafted for specific purposes, each tool designed for particular prey. Musicians carry instruments that will provide rhythm for the day's deadly dances. Finally come the gladiators themselves, armor polished until it reflects the sun, like mirrors. They represent the pinnacle of this entertainment, men who have turned violence into art. Their traditional greeting to the emperor carries weight beyond mere words, acknowledging the power that decides who lives and dies. The morning begins gently, almost playfully. Trained animals perform tricks that would seem magical to most people. Monkeys dressed as tiny soldiers create absurd military scenes while riding on patient goats. Elephants, those massive creatures from far-off lands, balance on their hind legs with surprising grace. Bears move to musical rhythms, their powerful bodies swaying in ways that seem impossible for such fierce predators. Children throughout the crowd point and laugh, their joy infectious even among adults. For these moments, the arena transforms into something approaching wonder rather than horror. The contrast makes what follows even more striking. Animal hunts bring reality crashing back, reminding everyone of the world's fundamental violence. Hunters called bestiari spend years learning their deadly craft, mastering weapons designed for specific creatures and situations. Early targets remain relatively harmless, allowing skilled marksmen to demonstrate their abilities. Ostriches with their long necks and powerful legs, gazelles that leap with impossible grace, deer whose only crime was being born in the wrong place. Clean kills earn appreciative murmurs, showing respect for skill rather than mere brutality. Then come animals that can fight back effectively. Wild boars charge with tusks that can tear through leather and flesh alike. Bulls lower their heads and thunder across the sand, driven by instincts that demand confrontation. Leopards and panthers move like liquid shadows, waiting for that perfect moment to strike. The crowd's reactions reveal their sophisticated understanding of this deadly ballet. They appreciate technique, courage, and quick thinking under pressure. A hunter who shows fear receives mockery, while one who narrowly escapes death through skill and luck earns thunderous approval. Consider the incredible logistics behind each exotic animal. Panthers from Africa required capture by specialists, transport across dangerous terrain, loading onto ships for Mediterranean crossings. Every step cost enormous amounts of money and often human lives. Yet here they die in minutes for crowd entertainment. This display demonstrates Rome's incredible reach across the known world. No corner of the empire is too distant, no creature too dangerous to capture and transport. Its politics and entertainment merged into one impressive spectacle, showing both wealth and power over nature itself. Morning hunts build toward their climax with the most dangerous predators. Bears from Germanic forests, hyenas from Egyptian deserts, and finally the crowd favorites, lions with their magnificent manes and bone-crushing jaws. These creatures emerge from underground chambers through clever mechanical lifts, appearing as if by magic through trapdoors. Lion hunts represent the ultimate test of human skill against nature's perfect predators. These aren't weakened captives, but healthy animals in their prime, confused and angry at their strange surroundings. When massive paws connect with human flesh, tearing through protective leather like cloth, reality intrudes sharply on entertainment. By midday, the pale sand bears dark stains, despite constant maintenance by arena slaves. The heat grows oppressive, making shade precious and cool drinks essential. Bodies grow weary from hours of excitement and horror mixed together in ways only Romans fully understood. The prisoners shuffle forward in their chains, and you can see the fear written on their faces. Some try to keep their composure, others weep openly. A few seem to have lost their minds entirely to terror. They're tied to posts scattered around the sandy floor, or sometimes just released to run, though of course there's nowhere to go. Today's execution has a theatrical twist drawn from the old stories everyone knows. The myth of Actaeon, the hunter who glimpsed the goddess Diana while she bathed and paid for it by being transformed into a stag. His own hunting dogs tore him apart, not recognizing their master in his new form. The condemned man wears makeshift antlers strapped to his head, a crude costume that transforms him into the mythical hunter. When they release the pack of starved hunting dogs, what happens next is exactly what you'd expect, and exactly what you hope you'll never see again. The sounds are somehow worse than the sights. Some people in the crowd laugh and cheer, as if they're watching a comedy at the theater. Others sit in dignified silence, viewing this as justice finally being served. Then there are people like you who can't quite look away but wish they could. This is how Rome handles those who break its laws, or threaten its carefully maintained order. The message is clear, brutal, and impossible to ignore. When the executions finally end, everyone seems eager for the break that follows. People stand, stretch their legs, visit the facilities, buy more food and drink. The conversations around you deliberately shift away from what just happened, toward what's coming next. The gladiatorial contests, the real reason most people came today. Livia breaks the uncomfortable silence between you by asking about betting. When you admit you wouldn't know who to choose, she smiles with the confidence of experience. Her husband always bets on the net fighters, she explains, because they have reach on their side. But she prefers the heavily armored swordsmen, the ones with better protection, better odds of walking away alive. She leans closer then, sharing a secret that suddenly makes everything more complicated. That well-dressed man in the equestrian section, the one who looks so respectable and important. His name is Quintus Pompeius, and he owns several of the gladiators who'll be fighting today. Including Africanus, the Ethiopian fighter, everyone's been talking about. The whispered rumor is that money has changed hands, that referees have been paid to arrange favorable matchups. Your eyebrows rise at this glimpse behind the curtain. Of course, there would be corruption, favoritism, fixed outcomes. These games might be presented as pure exhibitions of courage and skill, but they're also businesses with wealthy men investing in gladiatorial schools and expecting returns on their money. When you ask if this kind of thing is common, Livia just shrugs with practiced acceptance. Common enough, she says. The trainers who manage these fighters all have patrons among the rich and powerful. Everyone wants to back a winner, naturally. She pats your arm, noting your shocked expression. This is just how things work, she explains. The fights are still real, the danger still genuine. It's simply that some men have certain advantages. The trumpets sound again before you can ask more questions, announcing the start of the afternoon's main attraction. The crowd settles back into their seats, conversations dying down as everyone turns their attention to the arena below. The gladiators enter in matched pairs, and they make an impressive sight in their specialized equipment. Each type is distinct, instantly recognizable to anyone who follows the games regularly. The heavily armored fighters come first, modeled after Greek soldiers, carrying large round shields and long spears. They're paired against fighters with smaller, curved shields and wicked-looking curved swords. Both types wear helmets that severely limit their vision, which adds another layer of difficulty to an already dangerous situation. Next, come the fighters who carry two swords and wear almost no armor at all, depending entirely on speed and agility to keep them alive. They face opponents with breastplates and rectangular shields, a classic contrast of protection versus mobility. The crowd favorites appear next, the famous net fighters, with their tridents and minimal armor. Paired against their traditional opponents, the swordsmen with oval shields and distinctive smooth helmets designed specifically to prevent nets from catching on them. Finally, there are the mounted fighters, who begin their contests on horseback, with spears before dismounting to continue with swords. Each pair approaches the imperial box and offers the traditional salute, then takes their assigned positions around the arena. At a signal from the emperor himself, who's serving as editor today, the official in charge of the entire event, the first matches begin simultaneously. The Colosseum explodes with noise as the crowd erupts, cheering for their chosen favorites. You find yourself drawn to the contest happening closest to your section, between a net fighter and one of those smooth, helmeted swordsmen. The contrast between them is fascinating. The lightly armored man who depends on nimbleness and quick thinking, against the heavily protected warrior who relies on strength and endurance. The net fighter darts in and out of range, occasionally flicking his weighted net toward his opponent, but never fully committing to the throw. He's studying his enemy, looking for patterns, searching for weaknesses. The swordsman advances steadily, shield raised, trying to close the distance where his blade would be most effective. Livia points out something you hadn't noticed. The net fighter keeps circling to his opponent's left side, she explains, because the swordsman's vision is more restricted there, due to his helmet design. It's a clever tactical observation, and you realize she watches these contests with a technical eye, understanding the deeper strategies at play. Suddenly, the net fighter makes his move. The weighted net arcs through the air, but the swordsman raises his shield just in time. The net drapes over the shield's surface, and for a moment, the two men are connected by those deadly cords. The net fighter pulls, trying to drag his opponent off balance, while the swordsman plants his feet and resists with all his strength. With a powerful jerk, the swordsman yanks the net toward himself, pulling the lighter man forward and off balance. The net fighter stumbles, and the swordsman strikes with his blade, but his opponent twists desperately at the last moment. The sword catches him across his unprotected shoulder, drawing blood but missing anything vital. The crowd roars its approval at this first blood, but everyone knows the match is far from decided. The net fighter has lost his primary weapon, but he still carries his three-pronged trident, which he uses now to keep his heavily armored opponent at a safe distance while he retreats, planning his next move. Blood and sand tell stories that echo through centuries, and nowhere do they speak louder than in the great arena. Picture two fighters locked in deadly combat, their lives hanging on every move, every breath. The Retiarius, with his fishing net and trident, dances around his heavily armored opponent like a fisherman stalking prey. His weapon may seem simple, almost rustic, but in skilled hands, that trident becomes as deadly as any sword forged in the fires of Rome. The Expectator, weighed down by bronze and leather, moves like a walking fortress. His shield catches the afternoon sun, throwing light across the sand where so many have fallen before. But armor, for all its protection, carries a price. Every step becomes heavier, every breath more labored, as the weight of metal pulls at tired muscles. Around them, the arena pulses with life. A Thracian fighter stumbles as his helmet flies from his head, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Somewhere else in that vast space, an equestrian crashes from his mount, his dreams of victory disappearing into the dust. The crowd responds to each moment, like a great breathing creature, inhaling gasps of shock, exhaling roars of approval. These weren't random brawls between desperate men. There was science here, strategy that generals would admire. The net fighter knows his advantage lies in mobility, in keeping distance while seeking that perfect moment to entangle his prey. His opponent understands that time works against him, that he must end this quickly before exhaustion makes his armor feel like chains. Blood appears, as it always does. A trident finds flesh. A sword draws its crimson line. Both men carry wounds now. Both understand that the next mistake could be their last. The crowd rises to its feet, sensing something special unfolding before them. These matches that stretched long were rare gifts, displays of such skill that even emperors paid attention. Death hovers over every thrust, every parry, yet it doesn't always claim its prize. The fallen Expectator raises one finger skyward, a gesture that speaks volumes about the strange honor found in this brutal world. The emperor looks to his people, and they respond with waving cloth and shouted, "Mercy." Today, skill has earned both men the right to see another sunset. Most gladiatorial contests ended this way, with both fighters walking from the arena on their own feet. These men were investments, assets too valuable to squander on momentary entertainment. A skilled gladiator might fight for years, accumulating victories, wealth, and fame that would make free citizens envious. The afternoon sun begins its descent, painting the arena walls in shades of gold and amber, but the day's greatest spectacle still awaits. The Primus, the main event, brings forth champions whose names are whispered in taverns and shouted from rooftops. Africanes, the Ethiopian giant, faces Gallus, a warrior from Gaul whose 8 consecutive victories have made him a legend among his people. Both men carry identical equipment, removing any advantage except pure skill. Their shields gleam, their swords sharp enough to split silk. The fish crest on their helmets nod like swimming creatures as they take their positions. This is gladiatorial combat at its finest, where technique matters more than luck, where years of training come down to moments of perfect execution. They circle each other like hunting cats, neither willing to make the first careless move. The crowd grows restless, but these professionals understand patience. They probe and test, each blow a question, each response an answer in a deadly conversation only they can fully understand. Metal sings against metal as the pace quickens. Sand kicks up around their feet, creating a small storm cloud that follows their movements. Sweat makes their grip slippery, makes the leather bindings of their armor slip and chafe. Every breath becomes precious, every heartbeat counted. Victory seems to flow back and forth between them, like tide. Afrikanes lands a blow that dents his opponent's helmet, the bronze crumpling with a sound like thunder. But Gallus recovers, his shoulder driving into the Ethiopian's shield with enough force to send the larger man stumbling backward. The crowd becomes a single voice, a roaring beast that feeds on violence and skill in equal measure. Money changes hands in whispered bets, fortunes hanging on the next exchange of blows. Owners calculate profits and losses, while their human property bleeds for entertainment. When Gallus falls to one knee, his shield the only thing between him and death, the arena holds its breath. But champions are forged in such moments, and the Ethiopian surges upward with desperate strength, his shield becoming a weapon that drives the air from his opponent's lungs. Blood flows freely now, the shoulder wound that cripples Gallus, marking the beginning of the end. Switching his sword to his weaker hand shows remarkable skill, but some disadvantages cannot be overcome through will alone. The final moments arrive with inevitable certainty, two warriors locked in an embrace that only one will walk away from. The sand beneath the gladiator's feet turns dark with his blood, mixing earth and life into something that speaks to Rome's very soul. Here stands a man who fought with honor, who showed courage, even when his weapon was torn from his grip. Yet the crowd's mercy wavers like flame in wind. Some voices call for his life to be spared, others demand the spectacle reach its proper end. The emperor holds all their fates in his hands, weighing entertainment against compassion. His thumb points downward, sealing what was perhaps inevitable from the moment these men entered the arena. The defeated gladiator straightens his neck, accepting death with more dignity than many nobles show in their palaces. His opponent delivers the final blow with respect, understanding that tomorrow those same sands might drink his own blood. This moment captures something profound about human nature, doesn't it? We create beauty and brutality side by side, as if they were old friends sharing the same table. The same hands that built magnificent arches and engineered marvels also orchestrated these deadly performances, transforming survival into art, death into entertainment. Victory brings its own ceremony, palm branches and gold coins, presented to those who lived through another day. The champion receives his reward from the emperor himself, while the crowd begins its slow exodus through corridors that have witnessed countless such endings. Stone seats empty as conversations bloom about favorite moments, debated skills, and fearsome beasts. Outside these walls, the city transforms the arena's energy into festival atmosphere. Vendors sell memories, shaped in clay and metal. Children play with wooden swords, and the games extend beyond their official boundaries into every corner of daily life. A lamp seller, missing several teeth but rich in enthusiasm, speaks of tomorrow's promised rhinoceros, an African beast never before seen in Rome. There's something addictive about these spectacles, something that draws people back despite the blood, despite the moral weight of what they witness. Perhaps it's the extremes of human experience compressed into a single afternoon, or maybe it's simply the intoxicating feeling of being part of something larger than oneself. The gladiatorial schools operate like small cities, connected to the great amphitheater through underground passages. Here, men train for years knowing their education might end in sand and cheers. They learn not just to fight, but to die well, to transform their final moments into something worth watching. These training grounds reveal the machine behind the spectacle, where captured animals from distant lands wait for their theatrical deaths, where condemned prisoners rehearse mythological reenactments of their own executions. It's a strange kind of rehearsal, preparing not for applause but for oblivion. The Ludus Magnus stands near the Colosseum, like a shadow of its grander neighbor, substantial but subdued. Within its walls, the reality of what makes the games possible unfolds in daily routine, sweat and preparation, hope and resignation, mixed together in equal measure. Rome never truly sleeps. It simply changes costumes as day becomes night. Bakers replace gladiators, farmers follow emperors, and the same streets that carried excited crowds now bear the quiet commerce of ordinary survival. Yet the arena's influence spreads through every conversation, every child's game, every vendor's smile. The games create their own ecosystem of memory and desire, drawing people back with promises of rhinoceroses and new champions, exotic beasts, and familiar blood. Tomorrow always offers something unprecedented, something that's never been seen before. Even though the basic formula remains eternal, these contradictions define more than just entertainment. They illuminate the heart of an entire civilization. Rome builds monuments to beauty while orchestrating magnificent destruction, creates laws for justice while cheering for death, engineers marvels of architecture to house spectacles of primitive savagery. The underground world beneath the arena floor hides mechanical wonders that lift wild animals and elaborate sets into the light above, transforming the amphitheater into forests, lakes, even naval battle scenes. It's theater on a scale that defies imagination, engineering serving storytelling, serving death. Walking home through gathering darkness, the day's sounds still echo in memory like distant thunder. These experiences become part of personal history, individual threads woven into the larger tapestry of Roman life. Dreams arrive, filled with bronze armor catching sunlight, with roaring crowds, and the precise moment when courage meets its ultimate test. Morning brings curiosity about the machinery behind the magic, about training schools and underground passages, about how this massive entertainment system transforms human suffering into civic pride. The Colosseum's beating heart pumps spectacle through the empire's veins, carrying both glory and shame to every corner of Roman consciousness. For better or worse, these stones and stories represent humanity at its most complex, showing us what we can build and what we can become, revealing both our highest aspirations and our darkest appetites in the same magnificent, monstrous embrace. You stand watching the morning sun cast long shadows across the training ground, and there's something almost peaceful about it all. The sand beneath the fighters' feet catches the light in a way that makes everything seem softer than you know it really is. This isn't the frenzied chaos of the arena you've heard so much about. This is different. This is where the real work happens, day after day, in a rhythm as steady as a heartbeat. The men moving across the courtyard aren't the wild beasts that popular stories make them out to be. They're craftsmen, in their own strange way. Each swing of a wooden sword, each step and pivot carries the weight of countless repetitions. There's a meditation in the way they practice, something that speaks to the human need to perfect a skill, even when that skill happens to be fighting for your life. A man near you mentions he comes here most mornings, and you can understand why. There's a hypnotic quality to watching someone master their craft, the same fascination that draws people to watch a blacksmith work hot iron or a weaver create patterns from simple threads. Except here, the craft being perfected is violence, and that contradiction sits heavy in the Roman air. One fighter catches your attention, the way he moves with such precise economy. No wasted motion, no theatrical flourishes. Just pure technique distilled down to its essence. This is Valerius, you learn, a free man who chose this life. The idea of choice in such circumstances feels almost surreal. He could walk away, yet here he is, dedicating his days to preparing for mortal combat. The money draws some of them, certainly. Good pay for those who survive long enough to collect it. But there's more to it than coin. These fighters become celebrities of sorts, their names whispered in markets and shouted in taverns. Fame has always been a powerful lure, even when it comes wrapped in such dangerous packaging. Women of high society find themselves drawn to these men who dance so close to death, perhaps attracted to the very danger that should repel them. Then there's Niger, massive and intimidating, his story carved in the scars that speak of distant battles and foreign lands. He fights with two swords, they say, relying on the raw power that his frame provides. But watching him train, you can see the limitations that strength alone brings. Technique takes years to develop, and no amount of muscle can replace the subtle understanding that comes from experience. The trainers themselves tell their own stories without words. Most are former fighters who found a way to survive, not just the arena, but the transition beyond it. They've taken their hard-won knowledge and found purpose in passing it along. There's a roughness to their instruction, but underneath it runs a current of genuine care. These men represent investments, certainly. But they're also human beings learning to navigate impossible circumstances. The daily routine reveals itself in glimpses. One meal in the evening, after the day's work is done. A diet built around barley and beans. Simple foods that build the kind of body that can absorb punishment while maintaining speed. It's not the rich fare you might expect for celebrated fighters, but it serves its purpose. That layer of protective fat could mean the difference between a shallow cut and a mortal wound. Living quarters ring the courtyard, simple cells that house those bound by slavery to this life. They're basic but clean, better conditions than many free Romans endure. There's an irony there that feels distinctly Roman, this practical care for people who exist in legal limbo between human and property. Medical attention comes regularly too, because an injured fighter serves no one's interests. The free men among them present a puzzle that's harder to solve. They train just as hard, face the same dangers, but return each evening to whatever life they've built outside these walls. What drives a person to voluntarily enter this world? Perhaps it's the same impulse that draws people to any extreme profession, the desire to test themselves against the ultimate stakes. As training progresses, you witness the careful balance that governs everything here. Practice fights with wooden weapons, maintain the edge without risking the investment. Trainers intervene before tempers can escalate into genuine damage. Every precaution serves the larger purpose of keeping these men healthy and sharp for the real contests that await them. The business side of it all becomes clearer as the morning unfolds. Wealthy Romans appear on the viewing platform, checking on fighters they've backed financially. This isn't just entertainment, it's commerce on a sophisticated scale. Years of training, feeding, housing, and medical care go into creating each gladiator. The return on that investment comes only when they perform successfully in the arena. The contradiction sits at the heart of everything you observe. These men are simultaneously precious assets and expendable entertainment. They receive careful protection right up until the moment when their death might prove more valuable than their continued life. It's a uniquely Roman approach to the problem of spectacular violence, turning it into a systematic enterprise with managers and investors, and carefully calculated risks. More spectators gather as morning advances, including women in fine clothing, who watch with barely concealed fascination. The appeal these fighters hold transcends simple admiration for athletic skill. There's something about men who exist so close to death that seems to magnetize certain aspects of society. Fame and danger combine into a powerful attraction. New recruits arrive, and their presence shifts the entire atmosphere. Unlike the seasoned fighters, these men radiate uncertainty. Some carry defiance like armor, others wear fear like chains. They're a mixture of backgrounds and circumstances, prisoners of war standing beside condemned criminals, desperate volunteers next to the simply unlucky, all of them about to enter a world where survival depends on skills they don't yet possess. The whole system reveals itself as something more complex than simple brutality. It's a machine designed to transform ordinary men into extraordinary fighters, to take the raw material of human desperation and forge it into public spectacle. The Romans have applied their genius for organization to the production of violence, creating an institution that serves multiple purposes simultaneously. Training grounds like this one operate throughout the empire, each one a small world unto itself, where the normal rules of society bend around the singular purpose of preparing men for mortal combat. It's both fascinating and troubling, a testament to human adaptability and a reminder of how easily civilization can package its darkest impulses in professional efficiency. Imagine walking through the streets of ancient Rome, where the sound of clashing metal rings out from behind massive walls. Inside these walls, something remarkable is happening. New recruits, men who just days ago were slaves, criminals, or volunteers seeking fortune, are getting their first taste of what might become their new life. The training grounds buzz with activity. Experienced fighters move with practiced grace, their muscles remembering countless hours of repetition. They guide the newcomers through basic positions, showing them how to hold a sword, how to move their feet, how to keep their guard up. It's almost gentle, this first introduction to violence, but don't let that gentleness fool you. Most of these new faces won't survive the training process. The regimen is brutal, designed to weed out anyone who can't handle what's coming. A broken bone here, an infection there, or simply the inability to keep up with the demanding schedule. Death finds many ways to visit these training schools, long before anyone steps foot in the arena. The whole thing operates like a well-oiled machine. Groups rotate through different exercises throughout the day, each session building strength, speed, and skill. It's relentless, this system that churns out fighters the same way other parts of the empire produce soldiers or administrators. There's something almost industrial about it, this manufacturing of human spectacle. This training represents just one small piece of a massive puzzle. The games that Romans love so much require an enormous infrastructure stretching across the known world. Wild animals are captured in distant provinces, fighters are trained in schools scattered throughout the empire, and all of it must be coordinated, transported and managed to create those few hours of entertainment in the arena. The people who live near these training facilities develop their own culture around the games. Small food stands pop up, the ancient equivalent of fast food restaurants, serving hot meals to anyone interested in watching the spectacle. The smell of spiced meat and cooked vegetables fills the air, mixed with the aroma of fresh bread and wine. These little establishments become gathering places for enthusiasts, men who follow the games like modern sports fans follow their favorite teams. They analyze fighting techniques with the expertise of coaches, debate controversial decisions made by emperors, and speculate endlessly about the money changing hands through betting. The financial side of the games is staggering. Thousands upon thousands of coins flow through betting syndicates on a single match. Wealthy sponsors invest heavily in promising fighters, building stables of gladiators, like others might collect racehorses. Success brings prestige and profit in equal measure. But here's where things get interesting. Those passionate fans often suspect that not everything is left to chance. Who fights whom, when mercy is granted, which animals face which hunters, all of it might be carefully orchestrated. It's theater, they whisper, just theater with real blood. This creates a fascinating paradox. The danger is absolutely real, death is genuine when it comes, yet the whole spectacle is managed like a carefully planned performance. It's both authentic and artificial, spontaneous and scripted, depending on how you look at it. When special events are announced, like the arrival of exotic animals never before seen in Rome, the excitement builds to fever pitch. People speculate about how you might fight a rhinoceros. What tactics could possibly work against such a massive armored creature? The unknown adds an extra layer of anticipation to an already electrifying atmosphere. The Colosseum itself becomes a microcosm of Roman society when these events take place. The wealthy sit close to the action in their formal togas. The middle classes occupy the middle sections in their everyday tunics, while women and the poor find spots in the highest tiers. Yet, despite these rigid social divisions, there's something unifying about the shared experience. Everyone, regardless of their station in life, participates in the same collective excitement. Rich and poor alike gasp at the same moments, cheer for the same spectacular moves, hold their breath during the same close calls. The arena becomes one of the few places where all of Rome truly comes together. The ceremonies that open each day of games serve multiple purposes. There's the formal procession, the ritual salute to the emperor, and various preliminary events that build anticipation. But these aren't just empty traditions. They're carefully crafted experiences designed to transport the audience into a different world. Acrobats perform impossible feats, building human pyramids 3 stories high, while the crowd watches in amazement. Flaming torches arc through the air with perfect precision, pass between performers who make the dangerous look effortless. Tightrope walkers cross directly over the arena floor, sometimes pretending to slip just to hear the crowd gasp before recovering with a theatrical flourish. These performances remind us that the Colosseum hosted much more than blood sports. It was a venue for displaying all the talents and treasures that Rome had collected from across its vast empire. Skilled entertainers from distant provinces would demonstrate their arts before audiences that might never otherwise see such things. Dancers tell ancient stories through movement, their elaborate costumes and graceful motions bringing familiar myths to new life. Musicians accompanied them with flutes, lyres, and small drums, their melodies carried surprisingly well by the acoustic design of the massive amphitheater. Even in the highest seats, the music creates an atmosphere that draws spectators into the performance. There's something almost hypnotic about watching skilled performers transform the arena into different worlds. One moment it might represent a mythological landscape where heroes battle monsters. The next it could become an African savanna, complete with artificial trees and rocks, all constructed by slaves who work quickly and efficiently between events. The whole system reveals something profound about human nature and society. We create these elaborate spectacles, these carefully managed experiences that satisfy our need for excitement, community, and escape from everyday life. The Romans perfected this formula, but the underlying desires they satisfied remain remarkably familiar even today. In the end, the games represented more than entertainment. They were a way for an entire civilization to understand itself, to process its values and fears, to come together as a community, despite all the forces that might otherwise divide it. Picture yourself in ancient Rome, watching as wooden platforms slowly rise from beneath the arena floor. The anticipation in the air is almost thick enough to touch. What emerges first might surprise you: gazelles and zebras. Creatures that would make any Roman's eyes widened in wonder. These animals had never been seen before by most people in the crowd. They weren't dangerous, just completely bewildered by their surroundings. The noise from thousands of spectators would terrify any wild animal. These gentle creatures bolted across the sand, their hooves kicking up small clouds as they searched desperately for an escape that simply didn't exist. It's heartbreaking, really, when you think about the journey these animals had taken. Thousands of miles from their African homes, transported in wooden cages across the Mediterranean, all for a few moments of Roman entertainment. Hunters entered the arena next, carrying simple bows at first. Their job was to demonstrate perfect marksmanship, bringing down these harmless animals with clean, precise shots. The crowd appreciated skill, even when it came at such a cost. These weren't random soldiers or volunteers. They were professionals, trained specifically for this kind of performance. Every arrow had to count, every movement had to look effortless. But the Romans always wanted more. More danger, more excitement, more spectacle, so the next wave of animals brought genuine threats. Hyenas appeared, their haunting calls echoing off the arena walls. That sound, that unsettling laugh, would send chills through anyone who heard it. These weren't confused herbivores anymore. These were predators, constantly scanning for opportunities to attack or escape. Leopards slunk, low to the ground, their spotted coats rippling with muscle as they moved. Every step was calculated. Every glance was measuring distance and threat. The hunters had to switch tactics completely. Idrediade and Frere, spears replaced bows, and they began working in pairs, watching each other's backs as they faced these much more dangerous opponents. The crowd's energy was building towards something special, though. They knew the best was yet to come. Then it happened. A roar of excitement swept through the Colosseum as the first truly exotic creature appeared. A giraffe, with its impossibly long neck stretching toward the sky. Most Romans had never even heard stories about such an animal, let alone seen one. This gentle giant wasn't meant to die in the arena. Instead, handlers guided it around the perimeter using long poles with rope loops. The crowd sat in stunned silence, marveling at its spotted coat, its graceful movements, the way it seemed to survey the entire arena from its incredible height. This was Rome, showing off its power, its reach across the known world. Look what wonders we can bring from places you can't even imagine. Every exotic animal in that arena represented something far beyond entertainment. They were symbols of conquest, of trade routes stretching across continents, of the incredible resources Rome could command. The cost of capturing just one of these creatures, transporting it safely across thousands of miles of desert and sea, feeding it, housing it, keeping it alive until showtime, was absolutely staggering. After the giraffe came the true predators. Lions with their magnificent manes, tigers with their distinctive stripes, bears from the northern forests of Germania. Each animal required completely different hunting techniques. The handlers and hunters had to understand animal behavior as well as combat skills. It was like a deadly dance, choreographed by necessity and performed with lethal precision. Lions, for instance, would typically charge straight at their target. Hunters knew to use this predictability against them, sidestepping at the last moment and striking while the animal was committed to its attack. Tigers were more cunning, more patient. They would circle, wait, look for the perfect moment to strike. Bears were perhaps the most unpredictable, capable of surprising speed despite their bulk, and incredibly difficult to bring down. The crowd knew something special was coming when a larger platform began rising from below. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Then gasps echoed through the amphitheater as an absolutely massive creature appeared. A rhinoceros, grey-skinned and prehistoric-looking, with that distinctive horn jutting from its snout. Even people who thought they'd seen everything fell silent. This was a southern white rhinoceros, captured in the wilds of Africa. The expense of bringing this single animal to Rome was almost unimaginable. Several other rhinos had died during the brutal journey across deserts and seas. This survivor represented an investment that could have funded a small army, all for a few minutes of spectacle. The beast was clearly confused and increasingly angry. Arena noise that would overwhelm any animal was amplified tenfold for a creature that had known only the quiet of African grasslands. It pawed at the sand, testing this strange ground beneath its feet. When specially selected hunters entered, armed with the heaviest spears available and wearing extra armor, you could feel the tension ratchet up another level. What happened next was both terrifying and magnificent. The rhinoceros charged with surprising speed for such a massive animal. The first hunter barely dove aside in time, that deadly horn missing him by mere inches. The crowd's collective gasp was followed immediately by thunderous cheering. This was the kind of moment they'd come to see, raw power, meeting human skill and courage. For several minutes, the hunters worked to exhaust the great beast, making it charge repeatedly until its energy began to flag. The strategy was as much about patience as bravery. Whether they intended to kill it or merely subdue it remained unclear. Perhaps this creature was too valuable, too rare, to sacrifice in a single performance. Eventually, they managed to drive it back onto the platform that had brought it up. Down it went, back beneath the arena floor. The rhinoceros would live to appear another day, though its ultimate fate was probably sealed. Once the novelty wore off, once the crowds grew bored with even this magnificent creature, it would likely die in the sand for their entertainment. The morning's animal hunts concluded with a mass spectacle of more familiar, but still impressive beasts. Wild boar with their razor-sharp tusks, bulls that could gore a man in an instant, packs of wolves working together with terrifying coordination. Teams of hunters dispatched them with professional efficiency, though not without cost. One man was gored by a bull and carried from the arena, his fate uncertain, his blood dark against the pale sand. As midday approached, the programming shifted in ways that revealed the darker side of these spectacles. The arena was cleared and prepared for executions, the notorious damnatio ad bestias, but today brought an especially cruel twist. The condemned would face not just wild animals, but each other in what was described as a naval battle on land. Slaves brought out shallow pools of water, positioning them around the arena floor. The condemned were divided into two groups and handed weapons, real enough to kill but crude and unfamiliar. Most of these people had never held a sword before this moment. They were expected to reenact a naval battle while periodically being attacked by animals released from below. What followed was chaos in its purest form. Bloody, disturbing, lacking even the skill and purpose that made gladiatorial combat compelling to watch. These people had no training, no protection, no real hope. They slashed desperately at each other or tried to hide behind minimal scenery, only to be driven back into the fray by arena attendants with whips and burning brands. Periodically, trapdoors would open and release another predator. A lion, confused by the water and the number of potential victims. A bear, lumbering between the pools. A pack of wolves, working together, but unsure of their targets. Sometimes the animals attacked the condemned, sometimes they fought each other, sometimes they simply tried to escape the madness. Deaths came quickly from weapon, claw, and tooth alike. The arbitrary cruelty of this display was overwhelming. Many in the crowd seemed to share a growing discomfort. The usual bloodlust was muted in the face of such obvious slaughter. Even Romans, accustomed to violence in their entertainment, had limits to their appetite for meaningless brutality. Relief was palpable when the last of the condemned fell, and the arena was cleared once more. There was a longer break now before the afternoon gladiatorial contests. People stood, stretched, visited facilities, purchased food and drink. Conversations deliberately turned to lighter topics, as if the entire crowd was collectively agreeing to move past what they just witnessed. The outer ring of the amphitheater contained a whole world of commerce and culture. Food vendors sold everything from simple bread to exotic delicacies. Souvenir sellers offered miniature gladiator weapons, small statues of famous fighters, even vials of sand, supposedly from legendary battles. Small shrines dotted the concourses, where the superstitious could make offerings for their favored gladiators. It was like a small city built around the business of spectacle. Every aspect of Roman society was represented here, from the wealthiest senators in their reserved seating to the poorest citizens crowding the upper tiers. The games weren't just entertainment, they were a binding social ritual that brought the entire population together in shared experience, for better and for worse. Picture yourself wandering through the bustling marketplace that surrounded the great amphitheater, where commerce thrived alongside spectacle. Merchants had set up shop in every available space, knowing full well that crowds meant coins, and coins meant survival. These weren't just any ordinary vendors, mind you. They specialized in the peculiar art of selling dreams wrapped in clay and bronze. One particular shopkeeper had discovered something rather fascinating about human nature. He'd learned that people would pay handsomely for items that claimed to hold some connection to their heroes. His shelves groaned under the weight of oil lamps, each one supposedly molded from the actual faces of famous fighters. The craftsmanship was decent enough, though if you looked closely, you might notice that many of these authentic faces bore a suspicious resemblance to one another. But perhaps the most intriguing items in his collection were small glass vials, each containing what he swore was genuine gladiator sweat. Now, you might wonder who on earth would want such a thing, but apparently certain women in Rome believed these bottles held magical properties. The shopkeeper claimed they worked as love potions, and whether true or not, they sold remarkably well. It says something profound about humanity, really, how we've always sought to capture a piece of greatness, even in its most unusual forms. Bronze figurines lined another section of the shop, each representing a different type of fighter. The net fighters, or retiari as they were called, proved especially popular. These lightly armored warriors fought with nets and tridents, dancing around their heavily armored opponents like deadly fishermen. Their matches were poetry in motion, all about timing and precision rather than brute force. The afternoon sun had begun its slow journey across the sky, and the massive awning system above the arena, that remarkable feat of Roman engineering, started casting intricate patterns of light and shadow. This wasn't just practical, it was almost artistic. The temperature dropped just enough to make the coming hours bearable, which was no accident. Every detail had been planned with the comfort of tens of thousands in mind. When the gladiators made their entrance, something unusual caught the eye. Among the familiar sight of armored men striding across the sand, there were women. Female gladiators weren't completely unheard of, but they were rare enough to cause quite a stir. Some spectators cheered with genuine excitement, while others grumbled about the disruption of tradition. It's fascinating how entertainment has always pushed boundaries, forcing society to confront its own assumptions. There were also fighters of unusual stature, much smaller than the typical warriors. These matches served a different purpose, offering moments of levity amid the serious business of combat. Yet even these exhibitions demanded real skill. Being smaller didn't mean being less dangerous, and the crowd soon learned to respect what they witnessed. The female gladiators fought with a determination that gradually won over even the skeptical voices in the crowd. Their presence challenged something fundamental about Roman society, where women were expected to remain in domestic roles. Yet here they were, wielding swords and shields with deadly efficiency. It's remarkable how entertainment venues have often served as spaces where social rules could be bent, if not entirely broken. Between the main events, other performances kept the energy flowing. Trained animals demonstrated their abilities, musicians played stirring military songs, and dancers interpreted the victories that had just unfolded. This constant stream of activity served a purpose beyond mere entertainment. It prevented the crowd's attention from wandering, maintaining the electric atmosphere that made these events so memorable. As the day wore on, the most anticipated matches finally arrived. These featured the true champions, men whose names were known throughout the empire. The crowd grew quiet, casual conversation fading into focused attention. When skill reaches its highest levels, even the most boisterous audience recognizes that something special is about to unfold. One particular contest perfectly illustrated the art of gladiatorial combat. A heavily armored swordsman faced off against one of those net fighters. This classic pairing represented two completely different philosophies of warfare. The armored man relied on protection and steady advances, while his opponent depended on speed and cunning. Both men had earned their reputations through multiple victories, and their respect for each other was evident in every careful movement. The match became a lesson in patience. And neither fighter rushed into reckless action. The net fighter circled and feinted, searching for that perfect moment to cast his web of rope. The swordsman advanced methodically, shield ready, waiting for his opponent to make the slightest error. When the decisive moment finally came, it happened almost too quickly to follow. A clever feint toward the legs, a strike at the helmet instead of the body, and suddenly everything changed. The net found its mark, the armored warrior lost his balance, and within seconds, a trident point rested at his throat. But this story had a merciful ending. The defeated fighter raised his finger, requesting clemency, and the crowd, impressed by the skill both men had displayed, voiced their approval. The emperor granted mercy, and both warriors left the arena with their honor intact. Not every contest ended so peacefully. Some fighters left on stretchers, their bodies bearing the very real consequences of their profession. One match ended in death, when mercy was denied, a stark reminder that beneath all the pageantry lay genuine mortal danger. The crowd's reactions to these outcomes revealed something profound about human nature, how we balance our hunger for excitement with our capacity for compassion. The ceremonies that concluded the day carried their own significance. Palm branches, those ancient symbols of victory, were presented alongside purses filled with prize money. These moments transformed brutal combat into something approaching sport, complete with recognition and reward for excellence. As the massive crowd began to flow out through the exit passages, those brilliantly designed tunnels that could empty the entire structure in remarkably short time, the arena itself underwent its own transformation. Slaves emerged to rake the blood-stained sand, repair damaged equipment, and prepare for the next day's events. The machinery of spectacle never truly rested. It simply reset itself for another cycle. There's something both impressive and sobering about that constant preparation, how quickly the evidence of violence could be swept away, and a stage prepared for fresh drama. It speaks to humanity's endless appetite for stories, for heroes and villains, for moments when skill and courage are tested in their most elemental forms. The ancient Romans built their Colosseum with a genius that still takes your breath away. Picture this massive structure rising from the ground, stone by stone, each piece carefully planned and numbered before it even left the quarry. Thousands of workers showed up every single day, from skilled stonemasons to humble laborers, all working together to create something that had never been attempted before. The engineering behind it all was absolutely remarkable. These builders figured out how to use arches to spread the enormous weight of the structure, making it incredibly strong while keeping it surprisingly manageable for its size. They mixed concrete using secret recipes that could actually harden underwater, something that sounds almost magical when you really think about it. Workers operated massive cranes and pulley systems that could lift stones heavier than 10 grown men, hoisting them up to dizzying heights, with just a handful of people controlling the machinery. The whole construction site must have been a wonder to behold, filled with wooden scaffolding that seemed to reach toward the heavens, dust clouds hanging in the air, and the constant sounds of hammering and shouting. What's fascinating is how personal this massive project became for the people who built it. Individual craftsmen would carve their own marks into stones, little signatures that no one else would ever notice, but they knew were there. Decades later, these same workers would return as spectators, patting the walls with obvious pride, pointing out sections they had helped create when they were young apprentices. Emperor Vespasian had chosen the location very deliberately. He built this gift to the people right on top of where the infamous Emperor Nero had kept his private lake, part of that extravagant golden house that had caused so much resentment among ordinary Romans. It was a powerful symbol, taking back what one ruler had selfishly hoarded and transforming it into something for everyone to enjoy. The whole thing was really a masterpiece of crowd management too. The architects designed an intricate network of corridors and passages that could move thousands upon thousands of people through the building without creating dangerous bottlenecks or chaos. They called these passages vomitory, which sounds rather unpleasant, but simply meant places where crowds could pour out quickly. When you climbed to the highest tiers, the journey itself told a story about Roman society. The steep steps and distant view were reserved for women and the poorest citizens, while the wealthy enjoyed comfortable seating closer to the action. Your legs would burn and your lungs would strain by the time you reached the top, making you wonder how people managed this climb day after day during the games. But that view from the uppermost level, it made every painful step worthwhile. From up there, you could see the entire oval arena spread out below you in perfect, precise geometry. Beyond the Colosseum walls, Rome stretched in every direction like an endless sea of tiled roofs and stone buildings, all turning golden in the light of the setting sun. Temples and palaces rose from this urban landscape, their marble surfaces gleaming and catching the light. Smoke drifted upward from countless hearth fires and busy workshops, creating a hazy atmosphere that softened the edges of the sprawling city. In the distance, you could make out the Tiber River winding its way through everything like a silver ribbon, connecting this capital to the wider world beyond. This was Rome at its peak, home to roughly 1 million souls, the beating heart of an empire that stretched from the misty shores of Britain all the way to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, from the mountains of Spain to the ancient cities of Syria. And you were standing in its most iconic building, a monument that represented both the incredible heights of human achievement and the darker depths of human cruelty. The construction had taken place during a time when Rome desperately needed stability and unity. After Nero's excesses and the chaotic year, when 4 different emperors fought for control, Vespasian understood that grand public works could help restore confidence and pride among the people. The Colosseum became his way of showing that Rome was back, stronger and more magnificent than ever. Over the decades that followed its completion, the building would accumulate layers of human stories. The stone steps gradually wore smooth in the center, from countless feet climbing up and down. People scratched graffiti into various surfaces, carving names, crude drawings, declarations of love, or expressions of support for their favorite gladiators. Some creative souls even carved elaborate game boards into the stone, presumably to pass the time during less exciting moments of the games. These little details transformed the massive imperial structure into something more intimate and personal, marked by the everyday experiences of ordinary people who came to be entertained. The conversations that echoed through these corridors revealed just how seriously Romans took their games. Spectators would engage in heated debates about whether fighters had used illegal techniques, arguing about obscure rules with the passion that modern fans reserve for their favorite sports. They knew the regulations inside and out, discussing whether targeting helmet straps was fair play, or if certain moves crossed the line into cheating. As evening shadows lengthened and crowds gradually thinned out, the Colosseum would take on a different character entirely. The excitement and noise of the day would fade into quiet conversations and the slow shuffle of people making their way home. Some lingered to savor the experience. Others moved carefully to avoid the crush of departing spectators. In these quieter moments, you could really appreciate the craftsmanship that had gone into every detail, the way light played across the stone surfaces, how the architecture seemed to flow naturally despite its massive scale, the ingenious solutions to problems that no one had ever faced before. It was a building that would indeed stand for generations, just as that old mason had predicted, a testament to human ambition and skill that continues to inspire wonder even today. There's something almost magical about the way Romans talked about gladiators, long after the sand had been cleared from the arena floor. Picture groups of people, still buzzing with excitement, gathered in clusters throughout the massive stone corridors. Their voices rise and fall, debating whether that final strike was truly fair, or if perhaps the losing fighter had simply run out of luck. These weren't casual observers, mind you. They knew the rules, understood the techniques, could spot a feint from 50 paces away. For Romans, you see, watching the games was only half the experience. The other half happened afterward, in these animated discussions, where everyone became an expert. They'd dissect every move, every decision, every moment of drama they'd witnessed. It was like watching people today argue about their favorite sports, except the stakes had been life and death. The corridors themselves told their own story. These weren't just hallways, but marvels of engineering that had taken years to perfect. The curved ceilings rose high above, distributing the incredible weight of all that stone and marble. Even in the dim light of oil lamps, you could see how the Romans had solved problems that would challenge architects today. Every arch, every curve, every supporting beam had been calculated with mathematical precision. But what's really fascinating is how these spaces never truly went quiet. Even hours after the last gladiator had left the arena, there was still movement, still activity. Slaves moved through with brooms and buckets, cleaning away the debris of the day. Vendors packed up whatever trinkets and snacks they hadn't managed to sell. Guards walked their routes, keeping watch for troublemakers or thieves. The Colosseum, it turns out, was a lot like Rome itself. It simply changed costumes as the hours passed, shifting from one role to another. During the day, it was a theater of blood and sand. At night, it became something quieter, but no less alive. Hunger has a way of creeping up on you when excitement fades. Romans often forgot to eat during the games, too caught up in the spectacle to notice their empty stomachs. But when evening came, the body would make its demands known. Fortunately, Rome was a city that never slept when it came to food. Outside the great arena, Vendors still worked their small fires and portable ovens. The smell of grilled meat would draw you in, lamb skewers sizzling over glowing charcoal, seasoned with herbs that had traveled from distant provinces. A few coins would get you dinner, hot and satisfying, drizzled with olive oil that caught the flickering light. As darkness settled over the city, Rome transformed yet again. Torches appeared along the streets, casting dancing shadows on ancient stones. The crowds changed character too. Families had gone home to their evening meals, replaced by different sorts of people. Young men, loud with wine and bravado, women looking for customers among the lingering spectators, the city's nighttime inhabitants emerging like actors taking the stage. The city watchmen knew this transformation well. They'd seen it countless times, how the wine and excitement could make people careless. Pickpockets loved these nights, when purses were heavy and judgment was clouded. The narrow streets that seemed so grand during the day could become treacherous mazes after dark, especially for visitors who didn't know their way around. Smart travelers found lodging near the Colosseum. Places like the Gladiator's Rest, a 3-story building that catered to people who'd come to Rome specifically for the games. These weren't luxury accommodations, but they were honest and affordable. A clean room with basic furniture, a straw mattress that wasn't too lumpy, a small table with an oil lamp for reading or writing letters home. The real entertainment happened downstairs in the tavern. Here, the day's excitement got a second life in the form of stories and arguments. Wine flowed, watered down in the Roman fashion, while people relived every moment they'd witnessed. At one table, someone might be explaining why the Retiarius should have won his fight. At another, wild theories about tomorrow's exotic animal hunts. Romans loved their rumors and tall tales, especially after a few cups of wine. Someone would claim to have insider knowledge about white elephants being shipped from distant lands. Another would swear they knew which gladiators were scheduled to fight next week. Most of it was probably nonsense, but it was entertaining nonsense, and that's what mattered. Every tavern near the arena had at least one character who claimed to be a retired gladiator. Whether they were genuine or just convincing performers was anyone's guess, but they knew their business. They could describe the weight of different weapons, explain the strategy behind various fighting styles, show off scars that might or might not have come from arena sand. Their audiences didn't really care about the truth, as long as the stories were good and the technical details sounded right. As the wine continued to flow, voices would get louder, songs would get bawdier, and the tavern keeper would start watching more carefully. Romans might have been more relaxed about certain things than we are today, but they still had their limits. A word from the staff was usually enough to keep things from getting completely out of hand. It's remarkable, really, how these nights revealed the different layers of Roman society, the passion for technical details, the love of storytelling, the complex social rules that governed behavior even in the midst of celebration. These weren't just bloodthirsty crowds looking for violence. They were people who appreciated skill, understood nuance, and found genuine pleasure in analyzing what they'd seen. The whole experience, from the morning's anticipation, through the afternoon's excitement, to the evening's reflection, created a rhythm that defined Roman life. The arena wasn't just entertainment. It was a shared experience that brought the city together, gave people something to talk about, something to debate, something to remember, long after the torches had burned low and the taverns had finally grown quiet. The ancient world had its own way of organizing entertainment, with rules and traditions governing even the most violent spectacles. What seems chaotic to modern eyes actually followed careful patterns, structured like a dance that everyone understood. Violence existed, certainly, but it moved within boundaries, contained by customs that had grown over generations. Picture the engineering marvel that made such massive gatherings possible. Beneath the grand arena floor lay an intricate network of passages and chambers, a hidden world where the real magic happened. Workers moved through narrow corridors, their oil lamps casting dancing shadows on unadorned concrete walls. The air grew thick with earthy smells, animal musk, and the odors of hard labor. This underground realm, known as the high podium, contained 80 vertical shafts connecting to the arena above. Each shaft had its own lifting mechanism, powered entirely by human muscle and ingenuity. Teams of workers operated winches and counterweight systems, able to raise heavy platforms in moments. The larger lifts could carry groups of fighters or exotic animals, while smaller ones created individual effects, a single warrior appearing through a trapdoor, or a tree seeming to grow from nothing. Coordination in this subterranean world required perfect timing. Without direct view of the arena, workers relied on bells, shouted commands, and colored flags passed through small openings. Every effect was rehearsed until it became second nature, creating seamless spectacles that appeared spontaneous to the audience above. The gladiators preparing in these depths presented a fascinating study in human psychology. Some warmed up with practice weapons, their movements fluid from years of specialized training. Others sat in quiet contemplation, perhaps offering prayers or simply gathering their thoughts before facing potential death. Their bodies told stories of survival, muscled forms bearing scars from previous contests. Despite popular belief, death in the arena was less common than many imagine. These fighters represented significant investments, valuable assets that their owners preferred to keep alive. Most would survive to fight another day, though the possibility of death created a unique mindset among them. Some used humor to mask their anxiety, joking with companions before entering the arena. Others remained solitary, lost in private rituals of preparation. The psychology of facing mortality on a regular basis must have set these men apart from ordinary citizens. They lived with constant awareness that each contest might be their last, a reality that shaped their entire existence. This knowledge created bonds among them, a brotherhood forged in shared danger and mutual understanding of their extraordinary circumstances. The engineering systems supporting these spectacles revealed Roman ingenuity at its finest. Everything operated on precise timing, with workers moving purposefully through their assigned tasks. Animal handlers tended to exotic beasts in wooden cages, checking their condition and preparing them for the day's events. Prop masters arranged scenery, pieces that would be lifted to create elaborate stage sets. The contrast between the public spaces above and the working areas below was striking. While spectators enjoyed marble-faced walls and stone floors, the service corridors featured rough plaster and packed earth. Function took precedence over beauty in these hidden passages, where practicality mattered more than appearance. Morning sounds of the ancient city created their own symphony. Street vendors called their wares, while cartwheels rumbled over stone pavement. The distant calls of animals being led to market, mixed with the general bustle of urban life beginning another day. Sunlight streaming through window shutters painted patterns on walls, marking the passage of time in a world without clocks. Even the simplest meals carried cultural significance. Bread, cheese, and watered wine formed the basic breakfast for many citizens, consumed in taverns that grew quiet after the previous evening's revelries. These gathering places served as social hubs, where people from different walks of life might briefly intersect. The entire system represented a complex fusion of engineering, psychology, and social organization. What appeared to spectators as effortless entertainment actually required enormous coordination behind the scenes. Hundreds of workers, from animal handlers to elevator operators, contributed their specialized skills to create moments of wonder and excitement. This hidden infrastructure reveals something profound about human nature and our relationship with spectacle. The desire for elaborate entertainment has driven remarkable innovations throughout history, pushing people to solve complex logistical challenges. The same drive that created underground lifting systems in ancient arenas continues to inspire modern entertainment technology. The gladiators themselves embodied a unique form of celebrity, admired and feared in equal measure. Their lives balanced on the edge between glory and death, creating a mystique that ordinary citizens found both attractive and terrifying. This tension between admiration and horror reflects deeper human fascinations with courage, mortality, and the thin line separating civilization from chaos. Picture walking into a place that smells of sawdust and something else, something wilder. The scent hits you first, before your eyes adjust to the dim corridors beneath what might be the world's most famous arena. It's a mixture that tells its own story, fur and waste, and something harder to name, something that might just be fear itself. In these underground passages, cages stretch as far as torchlight allows you to see. Behind iron bars, creatures from the far corners of the Empire wait in an odd sort of patience. Some have already surrendered to their fate, lying still with the resignation that captivity brings. Others haven't quite given up yet, pacing back and forth, wearing paths in the straw beneath their feet. The dangerous ones, the really dangerous ones, they sleep now. Not natural sleep, mind you, but the kind that comes from careful doses of herbs and potions. It's safer that way for everyone involved. Even with all these precautions, accidents happen down here in the shadows. Just recently, a keeper got too close to a cage, and well, let's just say he won't be reaching for anything with his left arm again. These underground workers, they face their own kind of death every day, but nobody up in the stands really thinks about that. Nobody cheers for the man who feeds the tigers or the woman who cleans the cages. Their bravery goes unnoticed, unrewarded, except for the simple fact that they wake up each morning still breathing. Near the animal quarters, there's a room that looks almost like a workshop, but instead of wood shavings, it's filled with bandages and bronze instruments that gleam sharp in the lamplight. This is where the real artistry happens, where physicians work their quiet magic on torn flesh and broken bones. These doctors, they're not just any healers. They know things about the human body that most physicians never have to learn. They understand how sword cuts differ from claw marks, how to stop bleeding when someone's been gored by a horn, how to set a bone that's been shattered by a mace. A good arena doctor can mean the difference between a fighter walking out on his own feet or being carried out on a stretcher, never to return. It makes sense, really, when you think about it. These gladiators represent years of training, significant investments of time and coin. Of course, their owners want them patched up properly. The underground world stretches further than you might imagine, room after room of careful organization. There are chambers devoted entirely to water, with channels and pipes that can either drain every drop from the arena floor or flood it completely for those spectacular naval battles that Romans love so much. Imagine entire ships floating where, just hours before, men fought on dry sand. Storage rooms hold weapons by the hundreds, swords and shields and nets and tridents, each one maintained and sharpened to perfection. There are workshops where craftsmen build the elaborate sets that transform the arena into forests or cities or whatever the day's entertainment requires. It's like a small city down here, complete and self-contained, humming with constant activity. But perhaps the most sobering moment comes when you follow the path that gladiators themselves walk, the passage that leads from these preparation areas up toward the light. This sloping tunnel represents a journey from relative safety into something far less certain. The stones here have witnessed thousands of such walks, and some of those men never made the return trip. Standing in this space, you can almost feel the weight of all those final moments, all those deep breaths taken before stepping into the roar of the crowd. Even the strongest fighters, men who've faced death countless times, sometimes hesitate here for just a heartbeat. There's something profound about that hesitation, something deeply human about needing that extra second to gather courage. When you finally emerge into sunlight and take your seat among the crowd, everything looks different. The spectacular moments still unfold with perfect timing, animals appearing as if by magic, scenery transforming between events. But now you can see the hands that make it happen. You can picture the workers below, operating the lifts, coordinating the changes, making sure everything flows smoothly. The gladiatorial matches themselves take on new dimensions when you understand the careful thought behind each pairing. Fighting styles are matched not randomly, but according to traditions and strategies that have been refined over generations. Even the referees play their parts according to ancient protocols, and just out of sight, medical teams wait, with their bronze instruments and practiced hands. The crowd around you remains as engaged as ever, cheering and gasping at all the right moments. But occasionally, The real world intrudes on the spectacle. Perhaps two men get into an argument over gambling debts from yesterday's matches. Their voices rise above the general noise, threatening to disturb the carefully maintained atmosphere. But even this is handled with quiet efficiency. Guards appear as if from nowhere, moving through the seated crowds with practiced ease. They don't need to use force, their presence alone, usually enough to restore order. A few quiet words, perhaps a reluctant exchange of coins, and the disturbance fades back into the general murmur of the audience. It's remarkable, really, how thoroughly managed every aspect of this experience is. From the grandest processions to the smallest disruptions, everything follows established patterns, proven methods that keep tens of thousands of people entertained and relatively peaceful. The Romans have created something here that functions like a well-oiled machine, every gear and lever working in harmony to produce these moments of collective wonder. Picture yourself sitting in that ancient stone amphitheater. As the sun climbs higher overhead, the light itself becomes almost a character in this grand drama, shifting and changing as morning gives way to midday. Above you, sailors work the massive canvas awning, that ingenious system called the velarium, pulling ropes and adjusting the shade like they're manning the sails of some enormous ship. The expensive seats, naturally, get the best protection from the blazing sun. Those wealthy Romans in their white togas with purple borders, they're sitting pretty in the cool shadows. Meanwhile, everyone else makes do with whatever shade they can find. It's a perfect little snapshot of Roman society, really, where even the sun's rays follow the rules of social hierarchy. The heat builds steadily as the day progresses, and you start to notice how people cope with it. Spectators fan themselves with whatever they can find, palm leaves mostly, creating little waves of moving air. They drink more frequently from their cups of watered wine, dabbing at their foreheads with pieces of cloth. The physical reality of spending an entire day at the games is no small thing. Hour after hour, you're sitting on hard stone benches, surrounded by thousands of other bodies, all generating their own heat and noise. The crowding becomes almost overwhelming at times. Yet somehow, nobody seems eager to leave early. There's this unspoken agreement that the discomfort is simply part of the deal, the price you pay for being part of Rome's greatest public spectacle. During one of the brief breaks in the program, while workers down in the arena prepare for the next event, a vendor makes his way along your row. He's selling small clay cups of something called puska, a drink made from vinegar, water, and herbs. It sounds terrible, but in this heat, that sour tang cuts through your thirst better than plain water ever could. The woman sitting next to you, a practical sort with graying hair and knowing eyes, shares her wisdom. She tells you how she nearly fainted from the heat during her first visit to the games years ago. Now she comes prepared with everything: drinks, food, a fan, even a cushion to soften those unforgiving stone seats. It's knowledge you can only gain through experience, the kind of practical wisdom that gets passed along from one spectator to another. For example, one spectator to another, she talks about her late husband, how he used to complain endlessly about the heat and the crowds and the long hours. Yet he'd always be the first one ready to go when the next games were announced. Since his death 5 years ago, she's been coming alone. It doesn't feel right to miss them somehow, she says. Her words reveal something profound about how deeply these spectacles are woven into the fabric of Roman life. For many people, attending the games isn't just entertainment, it's part of who they are. It's a social ritual that connects them to their neighbors, to their city, to the very rhythms of Roman life. These shared experiences create memories that span decades, marking the passage of time in a way that few other events can. Then comes the part of the day that many find hardest to watch, the midday executions. Today's program includes something particularly disturbing: condemned men forced to act out scenes from mythology while being genuinely killed in the process. A man playing Icarus is set on fire when his wax wings fail. Another, cast as Actium, is torn apart by hunting dogs. It's theatre merged with execution, artistic pretension layered onto what's already brutally cruel punishment. Your neighbor quietly confesses that she never watches this part. She knows it's supposed to be justice, but she trails off without finishing the thought. The gladiator fights are different, she explains. Those men choose their path, train for it. This is just, again, she doesn't complete her sentence, but her meaning hangs in the air between you. Her discomfort mirrors your own, and serves as a reminder that even in a society that has normalized these spectacles, individual Romans still maintain their own moral boundaries. Not everyone cheers for every drop of blood spilled in the arena. The crowd contains multitudes, those who revel in the most extreme violence, those who appreciate only the skill and courage on display, and those who attend purely out of social obligation, while carefully looking away from the worst moments. You find yourself wondering about the Romans who don't attend at all. Surely there must be some who find the games completely objectionable or simply uninteresting. Are they quietly judged by their peers for their absence? Do they invent elaborate excuses to explain why they can't make it? Or is staying away from this central cultural institution simply accepted as a personal choice? These thoughts occupy your mind until the arena is cleared once more, fresh sand raked over the evidence of what just happened. There's a longer break now before the afternoon's gladiatorial contests, and people take advantage of it. They stand and stretch their cramped limbs, visit the facilities, purchase more food and drink. The conversation rises in volume as spectators discuss what they've witnessed and anticipate what's still to come. You decide to walk around the circumference of your seating section, observing the crowd from different angles. The Colosseum, when full presents a remarkable sight, a living mosaic of humanity in all its variety. From your vantage point, you can see how the different seating sections are clearly marked out. The social hierarchy of Rome made visible in stone and flesh. Down in the lowest tier, closest to the action, sit the senators in their distinctive white togas with purple borders. Their wealth and political power earn them the best seats in the house. Behind them are the equites, the knights, or upper middle class, marked by their own particular style of dress. Your section contains the ordinary citizens, shopkeepers, craftsmen, minor officials, the people who form the backbone of Roman society. And high above, in the furthest seats from the action, are the women, the poor, and those slaves who've been permitted to attend. It's a physical representation of Roman social structure, made manifest, everyone assigned to their proper place. The divisions carefully maintained even in this supposedly unifying form of entertainment. Yet, despite these rigid separations, there's also a curious way in which the games seem to level social distinctions, at least temporarily. All eyes, regardless of their position in the stands, watch the same dramatic events unfold. All voices join together in those collective roars of approval or disappointment that shake the very stones of the amphitheater. All bodies, from senator to slave, experience the same physical conditions: the heat, the thirst, the occasional discomfort of sitting too long in one position. As you return to your seat for the afternoon session, you prepare yourself for what many consider the main attraction, the gladiatorial contests themselves. Today's program promises some unusual matchups and fighting styles that haven't appeared in the previous day's events. The anticipation in the crowd is almost tangible, as everyone settles in for the spectacle that lies ahead. Deep in the heart of ancient Rome, there was something magnificent about watching two completely different fighting styles clash in the sand. Picture a warrior called a scissor, walking into the arena with this incredible contraption on his right arm. It looked almost like a metal sleeve, ending in a wicked curved blade that gave him his name. In his other hand, he carried just a small shield, and on his head sat a helmet decorated with a fish crest that sparkled in the afternoon sun. His opponent moved like water across the sand. The retiarius, with his famous net and trident, wore almost no armor at all. He needed to be quick, needed to dance away from danger, while his heavily equipped opponent tried to get close enough to use that strange blade weapon. You could feel the crowd's excitement building. As these two men circled each other, the scissor kept pressing forward, trying to close the gap, while the net fighter kept backing away, looking for the perfect moment to cast his net or thrust with that three-pronged spear. It was like watching a deadly game of tag, where one player had to get close and the other had to stay far away. The music floating down from the orchestra near the Emperor's box seemed to match every movement. Trumpets and horns, even water organs, all playing together to make your heart race during the tense moments, then building to thunderous crescendos when the fighters clashed. Nothing happened by accident in these great games, not even the soundtrack. When the Rotarius finally landed his strike, driving the trident deep into his opponent's thigh, you could almost hear the crowd's collective gasp, but the scissor, even wounded and dropped to one knee, kept fighting with such courage that the spectators couldn't help but admire him. When he was finally defeated and disarmed, the crowd's mercy was swift and overwhelming. The games continued with match after match, each one telling its own story. A Demarchurus, wielding two swords like some ancient warrior poet, faced off against a Hoplomachus with his long spear and shield. The contrast was beautiful in its own way, speed and aggression against reach and patience. Then came something truly remarkable, a female gladiatrix, stepping into the arena with a bow. Her opponent had to reach her with sword and shield before she could turn him into a human pincushion. You could see the strategy playing out like a deadly chess match. Him trying to close distance while staying unpredictable, her trying to maintain range while staying accurate under pressure. The mounted combat that followed was something special. Two equites on horseback, circling each other in a display of horsemanship and weapon skill that most people would never see anywhere else. There was an elegance to it, man and horse moving as one, that made you understand why cavalry had changed the face of warfare across the known world. As the day wore on and the sun began its journey toward the western horizon, golden light started slanting through the great arches of the Colosseum. The temperature dropped just enough to provide relief from the midday heat, and shadows began creating dramatic patterns across the sand below. The final event of the day was announced with special fanfare. Carpophorus, Rome's most celebrated animal fighter, would perform alone against multiple beasts. Unlike the usual group hunts, where several men worked together to bring down dangerous animals, this would be one man against nature, changing weapons and techniques with each new challenge. When Carpophorus walked into that arena, you could see why he was famous. Tall, powerfully built, his body was a map of old encounters with dangerous creatures. Scars crisscrossed his arms and torso, each one probably with its own story of survival against impossible odds. His first opponent came charging out of a trapdoor, like fury itself. A massive boar, tusks gleaming, muscles bunched for destruction. Carpophorus met it with just a spear and small shield, sidestepping that first terrifying rush and drawing blood with a quick strike as the animal thundered past. The wounded boar wheeled around, now enraged beyond reason. This time, Carpophorus planted his feet and waited, timing his move to perfection. As the boar charged again, he drove his spear straight into its chest, while pivoting away from those deadly tusks. The beast went down, mortally wounded, but still dangerous in its death throes, until the Bistarius ended its suffering with a precise thrust to the heart. Without even pausing to catch his breath, Carpophorus traded his bloodied spear for a bow and arrows. The next trapdoor revealed a leopard that immediately sought shelter among some artificial rocks placed in the arena. The spotted predator crouched low, eyes fixed on the human, tail twitching as it calculated its chances. Carpophorus knocked an arrow and stood perfectly still, actually inviting the attack. When it came, it was like lightning made flesh, a blur of spotted fur launching through the air. But his arrow flew true, striking the big cat in mid-leap. The leopard crashed to the sand, wounded but now much more cautious. What followed was a deadly game of hunter and hunted, with the roles strangely reversed. The human stalked the wounded predator as it tried to keep obstacles between them, both of them thinking, calculating, waiting for the perfect moment. When Carpophorus finally maneuvered the leopard into position for a clear shot, his second arrow found its heart. For his final challenge, Rome's greatest animal fighter took up sword and shield. The crowd's anticipation was electric as the largest trapdoor of all began to open. What emerged was every bit as magnificent and terrifying as they had hoped. A male lion with a full dark mane, its roar echoing around the entire amphitheater. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the climax that would make this day memorable long after they returned to their homes. Rome's premier Bestiarius facing off against nature's most iconic predator, the king of beasts himself. The lion paced at first, perhaps overwhelmed by the noise and strange surroundings. Carpophorus remained in the center of the arena, sword ready, turning slowly to keep the great cat in sight. Then, without warning, the lion charged with breathtaking speed that seemed impossible for something so large. Carpophorus met that charge, with his shield raised, absorbing the tremendous impact while slashing with his sword in the same fluid motion. His blade opened a wound along the lion's powerful shoulder, but the beast's momentum carried both man and animal to the ground in a chaotic, terrifying tangle, where it became impossible to tell who had the advantage. Picture Carpophorus standing in the arena dust, his chest heaving with exhaustion. Blood flows from deep gashes across his arms and torso, but his grip on his sword never wavers. The crowd holds its breath, watching this remarkable moment unfold before them. The lion that faces him is wounded too, bleeding from its own battle scars. Gone is the fierce confidence of moments before. Now it circles, wary and calculating, no longer the unstoppable force of nature it appeared to be. These two creatures, man and beast, have found themselves perfectly matched in this strange theater of death. Carpophorus moves like a dancer, every step deliberate, every glance purposeful. He watches for the moment when opportunity will present itself, the lion's muscles tense, preparing for another attack. When it rises up on its hind legs, massive paws ready to strike, the gladiator sees his chance. In one fluid motion, he steps forward and drives his blade deep into the animal's chest. The timing is flawless, the result inevitable. The great cat collapses, its life flowing away into the sand below. For a moment, silence fills the enormous space. Then the crowd erupts in approval, their voices echoing off the stone walls. Carpophorus raises his sword, first toward the emperor's box, then to the masses who cheer his victory. It's a ritual as old as the games themselves, this acknowledgement of power and audience. Blood from his wounds mixes with that of his fallen opponent, creating strange patterns in the arena dust. Attendants rush to support him as he leaves the fighting ground, their job to tend his injuries and prepare him for whatever comes next. The spectacle is ending, but the questions it raises linger in the air like incense smoke. What does it mean, this massive investment in staged violence? What truth does it reveal about Rome, about humanity itself? These thoughts drift through the minds of spectators as they prepare to leave. The philosophers write about such things. Ordinary citizens discuss them over dinner, but the answers remain as elusive as shadows at twilight. The games serve so many purposes at once. Their political theater, designed to keep the masses content and loyal. Their religious ceremony, honoring the gods with blood and sacrifice. Their social events, bringing together Romans from every level of society. Their artistic performances, displaying skill and courage in their most dramatic forms. But they're also something darker, something that reveals the contradictions at Rome's heart. Here is a civilization capable of remarkable achievements. Their laws govern vast territories with unprecedented fairness. Their engineers build structures that seem to touch the sky itself. Their administrators manage an empire that spans continents, yet they gather by the thousands to watch death as entertainment. They cheer as men and animals destroy each other for their amusement. It's a puzzle that even Romans themselves struggle to solve. This tension between their highest aspirations and their most brutal impulses. As the afternoon light fades, workers enter the arena to begin their cleanup. Bodies must be removed, weapons collected, blood-soaked sand replaced with fresh material. Tomorrow will bring new games, new spectacles, new displays of courage and violence. The crowd flows out through the carefully designed exits, their voices creating a constant murmur of conversation. Some discuss what they've witnessed, others plan their evening meals, still others think about business matters waiting at home. The games, for all their drama, represent just one part of Roman life. Evening settles over the city like a comfortable blanket. Lamps begin to appear in windows and doorways, small points of light against the gathering darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a flute plays a gentle melody that drifts on the cooling air. The streets grow quieter as people make their way home to their families and their private concerns. Rome reveals itself differently in this softer light, its harsh edges smoothed by shadows and the golden glow of sunset. The magnificent buildings seem less imposing now, more like shelters than monuments to power. In the taverns and inns throughout the city, people gather for food and companionship. Conversations flow around simple tables, covering every topic imaginable: love affairs and business deals, local gossip and family news, political speculation and religious debates. Life continues in all its messy, complicated glory. A traveling musician might enter such a place, carrying a lyre and a repertoire of popular songs. When he plays a romantic ballad, voices join in on the familiar chorus, coins clink into his collection bowl, and calls for another song fill the air. It's a reminder that Rome creates beauty alongside its more violent entertainments. In quiet rooms throughout the city, people prepare for sleep. They remove their sandals, feeling relief after long days of walking on stone streets. Oil lamps cast gentle circles of light against the darkness. Simple meals of bread and cheese, olives and wine, satisfy hunger without ceremony. Sleep comes easily after such intense experiences. Bodies tired from hours of excitement, minds full of images and impressions, gradually surrendering to the peaceful darkness. Dreams might replay the day's events or drift toward entirely different shores of imagination. The Colosseum stands empty now, its vast interior echoing with silence, but its presence shapes the city around it, just as the games shape Roman culture itself. Tomorrow will bring new spectacles, new displays of courage and brutality, new questions about the nature of civilization and entertainment. The great stone amphitheater sits quietly under Rome's starlit sky, its massive arches casting long shadows across empty corridors. During daylight hours, displace pulses with the energy of thousands, but now, in the gentle darkness, it waits. Tomorrow will bring fresh crowds, new spectacles, another day of drama and excitement. But for now, the Colosseum rests, just as the city around it settles into sleep. There's something almost magical about how this enormous building captures everything Rome represents. The engineering, alone, tells a remarkable story. Roman architects and builders created something that could hold 50,000 people, with clever systems for moving crowds in and out quickly. They designed elaborate mechanisms beneath the arena floor, hidden passages where gladiators and wild animals waited for their moments in the sun. Water could flood the entire space for mock naval battles, then drain away completely for the next event. The spectacles themselves revealed so much about Roman society. Gladiator fights weren't simply brutal entertainment, though they certainly contained brutality. These contests followed strict rules, almost like elaborate sporting events. Some gladiators became celebrities, their names known throughout the empire. People collected their portraits on oil lamps and pottery, the way we might collect photos of movie stars today. Wild animal hunts brought the far corners of the empire into the heart of Rome. Lions from Africa, bears from the northern forests, exotic creatures that most Romans would never see otherwise. These displays showed off Roman power, demonstrating how their legions could capture and transport anything from anywhere. Yet they also satisfied a deeper human fascination with nature's raw power and unpredictability. The crowd itself formed part of the spectacle. Senators in their finest togas, merchants showing off new wealth, ordinary citizens enjoying a rare day of free entertainment. Everyone had their designated seating area, creating a visible map of Roman social hierarchy. The emperor's box sat prominently above it all, where rulers could display their generosity by sponsoring games and their wisdom by deciding the fate of defeated gladiators. Street vendors worked the crowds, selling snacks and souvenirs. The noise must have been incredible. 50,000 voices cheering, gasping, debating the action below. People placed bets on their favorite fighters, argued about tactics, shared food and gossip with strangers sitting nearby. In many ways it resembled any modern sporting event, complete with passionate fans and commercial activity. But underneath all this excitement lay deeper currents. The games served political purposes, keeping the population entertained and grateful to their leaders. They reinforced social boundaries while also providing a space where those boundaries could occasionally shift. A successful gladiator might win freedom and fame, rising far above his original station in life. The building witnessed countless individual stories. Gladiators facing their fears before entering the arena, some fighting for survival, others for glory. Spectators experiencing their own complex emotions, thrill mixed with discomfort, admiration alongside disgust, families sharing memorable days together, children seeing wonders that would stay with them forever. Rome's empire stretched across 3 continents, but the Colosseum somehow contained all of it in one space. Exotic animals, foreign prisoners, tribute from distant lands, architectural techniques borrowed from Greek and Etruscan traditions. This single building became a miniature version of Roman civilization itself, displaying both its magnificent achievements and its troubling aspects. As night deepens around the silent amphitheater, the city's residents drift towards sleep. Emperors and slaves, gladiators and spectators, all surrender to the same basic human need for rest. Dreams might carry them back to the day's excitement or forward to tomorrow's possibilities. There's something profound about how civilizations create these grand expressions of their values and desires. The Romans built the Colosseum to last, using the finest materials and most advanced techniques available. They succeeded remarkably well, their creation still standing nearly 2,000 years later, still impressive, still capable of stirring strong emotions in visitors. The specific forms of Roman entertainment may seem foreign to us now, but the underlying human experiences remain familiar. People gathering to share excitement, to witness skill and courage, to escape from daily routines into something extraordinary. The desire for spectacle, for communal experiences, for stories that inspire and challenge us, these impulses connect us across centuries. Cultural practices change and evolve. Empires rise and eventually fade. But certain aspects of human nature persist. We still build great structures to house our entertainments, still celebrate athletic achievement, still gather in crowds to cheer for our favorites. The technology differs, the specific activities vary, but the essential motivation continues. In the quiet hours before dawn, when even Rome's busy streets fall silent, the Colosseum stands as a monument to human ambition and creativity. Its stones have absorbed centuries of cheers and gasps, witnessed triumph and tragedy, housed celebrations and mourning. Tomorrow will bring fresh crowds, new dramas, more stories to add to its collection. The nightbird calls softly through the darkness, its simple song floating over the complex human creation below. Natural rhythms continue alongside cultural ones, both part of the larger story that connects ancient days to modern times. Individual lives to vast historical movements, momentary experiences to eternal themes that shape every human civilization.
you.